Chapter 562. He originally wanted to kill the two of them, but they had followed him for a while, and they didn't know the real secret. Take them away. This trip wouldn't be so peaceful. Bringing them along would be harming them. In the end, he decided to part ways with them. Hearing his words, the two of them immediately became nervous. Qin Jiaxing nervously said, "Boss, aren't you going to take us with you?" Fu Chun also asked with a pale face, "Boss, did we do something wrong?" "Hee hee, you've done very well. Don't think too much. It's not what you think." Yu Qianshou strolled around the hall. "This trip will be rough, and I'm sure many people won't be willing to be lonely. With your cultivation, it's not suitable for you to follow. It's safer to stay here for now. Once I've established myself in the World Commerce Association, I'll naturally contact you." These words were perfunctory. Once they made a fortune in the World Commerce Association, they wouldn't use the identity of Neo Yid anymore. It was hard to say if they could contact him or not. When the two of them heard that he would find them again, their expressions became better. But because they had offended too many people recently, they were a bit scared when they thought about breaking up with him. "Boss, take us with you. No matter how dangerous it is, we're not afraid," Qin Jiaxing impatiently said. Yu Qianshou paused and turned around. After looking at the two of them for a while, he indifferently said, "I originally wanted to send you to a safe place, but after thinking about it, I've decided to let you develop on your own. That's because I feel that it's impossible for me to take every single person I meet as my own. That would be too selfish." "Boss, we followed you willingly. You're not being selfish." Before Fu Chun could finish, Yu Qianshou waved his hand and interrupted her. "I've already laid the foundation for you. Since you're in the cultivation world, danger is unavoidable. Don't cower and face it bravely. Strive to carve out a future that belongs to you," he said with a faint smile. "Who knows, I might need your help in the future." The two of them slightly lowered their heads. It was clear that their boss had already made his decision. Saying anything else was useless, and they could only accept reality. "After I leave, don't leave Ghost Manor for now. For now, it's still safe to stay here. After a while, the attention I had attracted here would fade away as I left. You should take this opportunity to plan your future path. Believe me, when you face it bravely, things won't be as bad as you think. There will always be a solution." Yu Qianshou sincerely warned. "Understood." The two of them replied in a low voice. They seemed to be in low spirits. Yu Qianshou opened his mouth and wanted to say some comforting words, but he felt that it was unnecessary. If they couldn't even bear such a separation, what future could they have? Thus, he resolutely turned around and walked out of the hall. "Boss!" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing shouted from behind. Yu Qianshou didn't even turn his head. He strode to the stairs and soared into the air. Just as Zhang Xian was trying to determine his direction, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Niesheng. "Senior Ox, can we go now?" Niesheng cupped his hands. Many people in Ghost Manor raised their heads to look at the two people in the air. Even the one-armed elder was the same. Yu Qianshou smiled and cupped his hands at the one-armed elder. During this period of time, he used the elder's territory to make some money, so he naturally had to thank him. The one-armed elder didn't appreciate it and went back to his work. Yu Qianshou glanced at Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing in the plum garden, then turned around and said, "Let's go." With that, he took out a flying sword from his storage bag, threw it under his feet, and stepped on it. Niesheng was stunned and asked in confusion, "Senior, what are you doing?" Yu Qianshou nonchalantly pointed around and said, "The scenery is pretty good. Why are you flying so fast? Don't rush, walk slowly." Niesheng was speechless. Only a ghost would believe that. He could tell that Neo Yid still wanted to hide his cultivation. Little did he know that everyone suspected that he was a soul formation expert. Even if he wasn't a soul formation expert, he was acting a bit too much. Just now, so many people had already seen him flying in the air. Wasn't it a bit too late to take out a flying sword now? How could he know what Yu Qianshou was thinking? He knew that everyone suspected that he was a soul formation expert, but he wasn't. Thus, he decided to fake it even more, making it seem like his cultivation was below the tribulation passing stage, letting everyone slowly guess. The more people didn't know about him, the more they would have misgivings. The moment the two moved, Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked around. He saw tens of people rising into the air 1,000 meters away. With the two of them as the center, they formed a circle and flew together. Seeing that he was on guard, Nie Sheng explained, "Senior, don't misunderstand. We're all on the same side. It's just that everyone has sent out a lot of people recently. I don't know what their intentions are. My master is afraid that someone will offend Senior, so he specially transferred some people from the headquarters to protect Senior." He, Sikongju has really put in a lot of effort. Yu Qianqiu smiled. "It's my duty," Nie Sheng said politely. Then, he rubbed his lips and let out a whistle. The 30 people 1,000 meters away quickly approached them. When they were about 100 meters away from the two of them, they stopped. Looking at how these people were flying while being vigilant of their surroundings, they really did look like they were protecting someone. Yu Qianqiu didn't care at first, but then he frowned and felt that something was wrong. These 30 people were all at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head slightly to look at the expressionless Nie Sheng and muttered to himself, "An expert in the late stage of the tribulation passing stage and an expert in the soul formation stage like me need to be protected by number 30? Isn't this unnecessary? Could it be that I'm too suspicious and overthinking things?" Yu Qianqiu secretly raised his guard, his eyes faintly observing the surroundings. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. In front of him was a vast forest that was rare even in the Golden Mountain country. Who cared if it was rare or not? Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with it. However, in the depths of the forest, a group of birds suddenly flapped their wings and flew away. They seemed to have been startled by something. "What's there?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze quickly shifted to Nie Sheng. He had clearly noticed it as well, but his lips only moved slightly. He didn't think much of it and instead glanced over. In the end, their gazes met. The two of them smiled and didn't say anything. Both of them had ulterior motives as they turned around as if nothing had happened. However, the 30 guards weren't just for show. They had clearly also noticed that something was wrong. The leader gestured forward, and 4 people immediately flew forward to investigate the dense forest in front of them. Yu Qianqiu looked back and could still see the ghost village at the edge of the forest. Thus, he deliberately slowed down. If there was anything he couldn't handle, he would immediately turn back. With that one-armed old man around, it would be safer. If it really didn't work, he would consider flashing back to Utopia. Just as the 4 guards flashed into the forest that had been startled by the birds, they suddenly saw a few balls of light light up in the forest. Then, they heard a few violent bangs, followed by a few screams. The trees there fell, and then 6 black shadows flashed into the sky. 6 masked men in black robes flew over with a whistling sound. "There's an ambush," the leader of the guards shouted loudly. The remaining 20 people quickly rushed to the front and formed a triangular formation to block the front. Nie Sheng also flashed over and shouted angrily, "The World Chamber of Commerce is doing business. Whoever dares to cause trouble, state your name." His voice rolled towards the incoming people. The 6 masked men in black didn't reply at all and directly rushed over. Both sides instantly engaged in a chaotic battle. For a moment, loud noises shook the heavens. It was a battle of life and death. Yu Qianqiu stood upright in the air on his sword. His eyes narrowed into slits as he realized that the 6 masked men in black were all experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Nie Sheng really did have some ability. He was actually able to fight 2 opponents by himself. As for the remaining 20 people, they were in a miserable state. How could they be a match for 4 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage? In just a few rounds, there were already screams and 5 or 6 people falling from the sky. In the ghost manor, a group of loose cultivators saw that Niu Yud had left and were discussing when they suddenly heard the sounds of intense fighting coming from the back of the mountain. From the sounds, it wasn't a fight between ordinary cultivators, but experts. "It seems to be the direction that Senior Niu left in," someone said in surprise. "Let's go and take a look." The group of people flew up on their swords and flew towards the back of the mountain. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other and also quickly flew over. The manor instantly became quiet. The one-armed old man who was pruning listened for a while and then continued with his work. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. Don't say that these 6 masked men were hiding here to ambush Nie Sheng's group. It seemed that other than the people at the World Chamber of Commerce, even Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing weren't sure that I left the Ghost Manor today, and they just happened to be lying in ambush along the way. What are they trying to do? Playing a trick of self-injury? Just as he thought of Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing, he heard 2 people shouting from behind him, "Boss!" Yu Qianqiu looked back and saw 2 people flying over first. Behind them was a large group of loose cultivators who flew over to watch the show. "What are you doing here? Hurry up and go back." Yu Qianqiu's expression changed as he scolded. These 6 masked men at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage were obviously coming for him. Weren't these 2 people courting death by coming over now? He knew his own abilities. He had the ability to deal with this kind of situation, but it would be difficult for him to save people. The 2 of them stopped a dozen meters away and looked at the intense fight in front of them with apprehensive expressions. Fu Chun said embarrassedly, "We heard the sounds of fighting and rushed over to take a look. We didn't expect you to be here, boss. Get lost." Yu Qianqiu was furious. However, just as he finished cursing, he heard a few whistling sounds coming from behind him. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing cried out in unison, "Boss, be careful." The 2 of them quickly flashed over and swept past Yu Qianqiu's left and right sides. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and saw 2 masked men rushing over. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing, these 2 unknown people, didn't hesitate to release their flying swords to block for him. Chapter 563. You're no match for them. Go back. Yu Qianqiu's angry roar came to an abrupt end, but it was too late. As soon as the 2 fellows' flying swords shot out, the 2 masked men raised their swords and slashed out 2 sharp sword qis. Not only did the sword qis have an astonishing momentum, but it also directly cut the 2 flying swords into 2 pieces. At this time, the 2 fellows finally reacted. The opponent's cultivation level was much higher than theirs. In addition, the 2 of them were only at the early stage of tribulation passing and didn't have the strength to match it. The opponent was not someone they could fight against. Perhaps Qin Jiaxing had never encountered such a powerful opponent before, and he was somewhat stunned. He could only watch helplessly as the other party sent another sword beam at him. His entire body was cut in half by the sword beam head-on. Like a watermelon that had been cut open by a knife, red juice splattered everywhere, and the scene was too horrible to look at. Fu Chun's reaction was slightly faster. She turned around and suddenly felt a chill on her waist. She looked down and saw a bright white sword qi cut out from her abdomen, followed by a spray of blood. She watched as her upper and lower body separated and fell into the dense forest below. The moment before her upper body fell, Fu Chun looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror. There was a trace of doubt in her eyes. Why didn't Boss save them with such a high cultivation level? Yu Qianqiu also wanted to save them. The black flame flying sword had already appeared in his sleeve. He was forced to use the black flame flying sword that could expose his identity. How could he say that he didn't want to save them? However, it was too fast. He didn't have time to make a move at a distance of nearly 100 meters. The outcome of the battle had already been decided. Even if the 2 of them could resist for a few more seconds, it would be enough. Unfortunately, the difference in cultivation level was one of the reasons. The key was that the 2 of them had never faced such an expert before. The moment the opponent attacked, the 2 of them were already scared stiff. At this time, Yu Qianqiu only hated the fact that he wasn't a real soul formation expert. Even a late-stage tribulation passing expert would be fine, as long as he could teleport. He hated himself for not giving the 2 of them better flying swords. At least they would be able to resist a little. Nie Sheng, who was fighting fiercely against the 2 masked men, had actually been observing them. Yu Qianqiu's suspicions were not wrong. This was indeed a trap. However, it could not be said to be a trap. It was just a test by Sikongju. Although it was rumored that Niu Yud was a spirit-severing expert, Guan Zhongkai was quite sure of it. Sikongju also believed that Niu Yud was a spirit-severing expert. However, Bai Kong had always been suspicious. A spirit severing Niu Yud. With his experience in the cultivation world, how could he not have heard of it? After receiving Niu Yud's portrait, he realized that he had never seen him before. Bai Kong found it strange. How could a spirit-severing cultivator not show his face in the cultivation world? If he were to say that he was ignorant, then fine. Bai Changchun is the most senior person in the cultivation world, right? However, during Bai Changchun's appointment at the EC, all the masters of the soul formation stage had gathered, except for Wen Lanfeng, but none of them had seen this person. Could it be that Bai Changchun doesn't know this person? After Bai Kong and Sikong Ju contacted each other, the latter also felt that his master's words made sense. In the end, Bai Kong ordered, rumors may not be trustworthy. Think of a way to test this Niu Yud's depth and see if he is a spirit-severing expert. This will make it easier for us to make a decision in the future. Bai Kong's plan could not be said to be bad. If he was really a spirit-severing expert, it would be worth it to invite him to join the World Commerce Association. If he wasn't then I won't be polite. I'll use this chance to directly capture him. I don't even need to give him a single spirit stone. Moreover, I'll make him spit out what he swallowed in the past. As for the limit-breaking pill, as long as Niu Yud is in my hands, I don't have to worry about not being able to pry his mouth open. Even if I can't pry his mouth open, at least the item won't fall into other people's hands. Sikong Ju deeply agreed and immediately planned this scene. The 30 early-stage tribulation passing guards actually didn't know anything and were truly doing their duty. The 6 late-stage tribulation passing masked men, including Niesheng, were all Sikong Ju's direct disciples. As the main characters, the 7 of them naturally knew the plot. However, plans couldn't keep up with changes. Who would have known that the 6 disciples lying in ambush would alarm a flock of birds? In reality, although Sikong Ju was prepared to sacrifice some of these 30 guards, he didn't plan to let them pay such a huge price and cause them to be completely wiped out. The World Commerce Association's influence was not bad, but nurturing 30 early-stage tribulation-passing experts was not an easy task. After all, it required time to accumulate. The original plan was for Niesheng to bring Niu Yud to the sky above the ambush location, and the people below would suddenly attack Niu Yud and Niesheng. If Niu Yud was really very powerful, Niesheng would pretend to be injured to delay him. The attackers would quickly break out of the encirclement, and in the process, they would kill a few guards to wash away the suspicion on the World Commerce Association. On the other hand, if the rumors were wrong and Niu Yud wasn't much, they would definitely reveal their ferociousness and capture him. The 30 guards would naturally be fine. Who knew that there would be such a big mistake? Niesheng and his martial brothers, who were pretending to fight vigorously, secretly complained. The remaining guards, on the other hand, were in a killing frenzy and fought with their lives on the line. Little did they know that if they hadn't secretly let them go, they would have been finished long ago. As a last resort, in order to complete their master's arrangements, 2 of them decided to take the risk. That was why Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were killed. However, it was this scene that made Niesheng and the others suspicious. Hearing Niu Yud's anxious roar, it didn't seem fake. If he really was a soul formation expert, why didn't he help them? When the group of loose cultivators saw that Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing had been killed, they immediately turned around and ran, afraid that they would be implicated. The black fire-flying sword in Yu Qinsho's sleeve hid back into his body. A smile appeared on his face, a smile that was abnormally sinister. After the 2 masked men killed the 2 people blocking their way, they quickly rushed over. Seeing that they were only a few dozen meters away, just as they were about to attack, they saw Niu Yud clench his fists and reveal a mouth full of eerie white teeth. Yu Qinsho spread his arms and roared with a sinister expression. His roar was filled with sorrow and helplessness. Speaking of Yu Qinsho, he was famous in the cultivation world for being cruel and merciless. It was not an exaggeration to say that he killed without batting an eye. It didn't matter how cruel or evil others were to him. He liked this kind of people the most. He could bear all the vicious and evil tricks because he never thought of himself as a good person. However, the only thing he couldn't bear was when other people treated him well sincerely. Even if they treated him well sincerely, he would feel that it would be hard to repay them. To him, there was nothing heavier than this in this world. In his previous life, he had been rolling around in dirty water. What bad things had he not done? He had long felt that he wasn't a good person. He was evil inside and out, and his heart had long become numb. However, once he met someone who treated him well sincerely, he would suddenly wake up and feel that he was still human. Therefore, he cherished this kind of relationship and carefully protected it in every possible way. He wasn't a person who fell in love easily. But why were Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing so stupid? They usually looked like they were afraid of death, but why did they risk their lives for him at such a critical moment? You guys are too stupid. I won't feel sad for your deaths, and I won't shed a tear for you. Two fools, idiots, it's good that you died, lest I find you unpleasant in the future. Countless complaints and curses towards Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun were all vented in this sorrowful and helpless roar. Along with the roar, a series of extreme negative emotions such as despair, desolation, indifference, and death surged out, forming a majestic aura that chilled to the bone, an abnormally terrifying aura. The kind of terrifying aura that made one's soul tremble instantly burst out in an earth-shattering manner. The aura of the black fire hidden in his body burst out in an instant. He wanted to control it, wanted to hold it back, but subconsciously chose to erupt. The area within a radius of a few miles was instantly filled with an icy and frightening aura. It was originally a sunny day, but the area within a radius of a few miles seemed to have turned into a patch of dusky gray. It was as if the netherworld had opened up a door here. All the insects, birds, and beasts within a radius of a few miles didn't even have the chance to escape. They were instantly frozen to death. The battle on the other side stopped, and everyone looked over while trembling. They didn't understand what was going on. Nie Sheng looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was roaring angrily with his arms wide open in horror. His heart sank, and he subconsciously felt that his probing this time was too absurd. He had offended someone he shouldn't have. He finally experienced the kind of terror that big senior brother Guan Zhongkai had described. It seemed to be even more terrifying. Who said that Niu Yud wasn't an expert of the soul formation stage? He wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. This place had basically turned into hell on earth. It was too terrifying. Within the ghost manor at the edge of the terrifying aura, a group of loose cultivators had just landed. Even though they were at the edge, those loose cultivators with mediocre cultivation levels still felt a little overwhelmed, and they flew away while trembling. The one-armed old man who was pruning suddenly raised his head and looked in that direction. The shock in his eyes was difficult to conceal. He didn't know which expert was able to emit such a terrifying aura. Could it be by Changchun? No, this wasn't by Changchun's aura. It was completely different. A loose cultivator flew past him, and his single arm grabbed onto his shoulder with lightning speed. That loose cultivator said in horror, "Senior, what are you trying to do? Speak, what's going on over there?" The one-armed old man asked for the first time. "You're not mute." That loose cultivator hurriedly corrected himself in shock. It's Senior Niu Yud who was ambushed by unknown masked people. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were killed. That's all I know. The one-armed old man shook him off with one hand and directly disappeared from the ghost manor using teleportation. The two masked people who attacked Yu Qianqiu were the first to bear the brunt of this terrifying ice-cold wave. Moreover, they were at the very center of this terrifying aura. At this moment, let alone attack, the swords in their hands had already fallen out of their hands. They forcefully held on in the air, but they could hear their upper and lower teeth chattering nonstop, and their eyes were showing signs of rolling back. Chapter 564. Then, a green flying sword flew out of his sleeve and cut a flat surface on the trunk of the big tree between the two graves. The green light flashed, and a few words were engraved. "Wake up from your dream." 6 heads were at the early stage of the Tribulation Transcendence stage, and 3 heads were at the late stage. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at the one-armed old man in the air, not far away. The two stared at each other for a long time. There was a flat bluestone path at the back door that led to the canyon 100 meters away. There was actually nothing in the canyon. It was just a place for cultivators to go and land. The main reason was that they were afraid that the cultivators would come and go too shockingly, scaring the mortals. In a slightly flat place in the forest, he found a big tree. On both sides of the tree, he slashed out 2 deep pits with his palms. Then, he released 2 clouds of golden mist into the 2 pits. In the blink of an eye, 2 golden coffins appeared in the 2 pits. Was he still human? The one-armed old man asked himself. The consequences could be imagined, but he didn't dare to say anything to save them. The consequences of revealing the secret would probably anger Niu Yud. Such a terrifying person was already so powerful just from his aura. Once he started fighting, what would happen? Yu Qianqiu's gaze was unusually cold as he watched the 4 people fly away. He tilted his head slightly and slowly floated in front of another masked man. The black flames leaping in his eyes reappeared. White smoke, a broken body, and another head in his hand. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of a masked man. Suddenly, 2 shining black flames appeared in his eyes. The masked man's eyes completely rolled back, and the last trace of resistance he had also fainted. His entire body fell down with a whoosh. Later, he found the 2 halves of Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing's corpses. The Gold Casting City Guild Hall was beside the main road in the southern suburbs of Gold Casting City. An endless stream of mules and horses shuttled in and out of the gate. It was a busy scene. All the businessmen in Gold Casting City knew that this guild hall was the largest trading place in this area. They did all kinds of business as long as they could make money. The one-armed old man's eyes flickered. On the other hand, Niesheng's eyes were slightly protruding and red. His expression was very complicated, but the most obvious one was a trace of pain. The price he had paid to probe was too great. The large hall was surrounded by high walls, and the inside of the hall was divided into 2 halves by a series of buildings. One half was extremely prosperous, while the other half was not so noisy. The businessmen in the secular world did not know what the other half was like. It had not been open to the public for many years. Someone had tried to enter through the back door to take a look, but the guards at the back refused to let them in. No matter how powerful their background or connections were, they would not let them in. After that, his figure flashed, and his speed increased a little. 6 balls of dense white mist were sucked into his palm, and another 6 heads were plucked off. A total of 9 hair buns were entangled in one hand. What an evil aura! The one-armed old man was startled and suddenly came to his senses. He immediately circulated his energy to his limbs and bones to expel the death qi that had invaded his body. He stopped 400 or 500 meters away in the air and looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. He simply could not imagine how a living person, a cultivator brimming with vitality, could give off such a horrifying and evil death qi. The 4 of them exchanged glances before turning around and flying away with great difficulty. The circulation of quintessence in their bodies was very slow, and their mental energy was also very weak. Hence, their flying speed was not fast. Niesheng was startled and pretended not to understand. He asked, "Senior, what do you mean? Why do I not understand?" "Senior." Niesheng felt that something was wrong and wanted to explain. However, he saw 2 balls of black flames burning in the other party's eyes. Boundless despair and a cold aura instantly enveloped him. He wanted to turn around and flee, but he felt that his body would not listen to him. After that, his mind went blank, and he did not know what to do. The 4 masked men who were flying away would occasionally turn their heads back to look. When they saw this horrifying scene, they did not dare to turn back and flew away with all their might. He grabbed the 2 hair buns on his head with one hand and floated towards Niesheng expressionlessly. That person's body turned into a dried corpse in the blink of an eye. However, the head that was grabbed was still intact. His shriveled body, which had shrunk to twice its original size, dangled in the loose clothes beneath his head, swaying leisurely. The scene was extremely strange. Yu Qianqiu swept a glance at them and said indifferently, Sikong Ju is really ruthless. No wonder his name has the word Ju in it. It's a pity that these dozens of loyal and devoted disciples didn't even know what happened until they died. He put down his arms, and the anger on his face disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianzhou's face was as calm as still water. There was not a single trace of emotion on his face. Hurry up and leave. Don't hesitate. Leave before Nyoyud kills us. If we're late, none of us will be able to leave. Niesheng transmitted his voice to the four of them and roared hysterically. However, he still had to pretend to look at them with hatred on his face. In reality, he was suspecting that with Nyoyud's terrifying cultivation, the four of them might not be able to escape. Little did they know that the front was a place that did business for the secular world. The back was a place that only did business for the cultivation world. It was not a place that ordinary mortals could reach. This was the World Commerce Association branch that was famous in the cultivation world. He strolled in the air and walked towards the two dazed masked men. His gaze towards the two of them was filled with a deathly stillness and emptiness, as though there was nothing there. He had never seen such a stealthy method of killing people. It was as though he was casually picking off someone's head, especially the scene of the body turning into a dried corpse. It was a little disgusting to look at. The closer he got, the more dazed he became. His soul fire was constantly shrinking, as though it could be extinguished at any moment. The life force in his body was being stripped away bit by bit, replaced by an aura of death. Niesheng stared at Yu Qianzhou with fear as he walked towards his two junior brothers who were in a deadlock in the air. What would happen to his two junior brothers? The moment the one-armed old man entered the sinister and terrifying area, his heart also trembled. This strange aura did not suppress the human body first. Instead, it suppressed the soul and mind that no matter how high one's cultivation was, it was difficult to resist. Gazing at the two golden coffins, Yu Qianzhou sighed and said, "I'm sorry, but this is all I can do for you. Brothers, have a safe journey." With that said, he waved his palm, and the soil returned to its original position. He then patted them firmly. With a light stamp of his foot, the flying sword he was standing on flipped up and flashed into the storage bag at his waist. Niesheng resisted looking at the two heads in his hands. He cupped his hands and said while shivering, "Senior is mighty and killed the enemy in one move. Our World Commerce Association will definitely work together to capture those who escaped. We won't let them escape. Senior, could you restrain your aura a little? I really can't hold on much longer." Yu Qianzhou grabbed his head and watched coldly as the corpse turned into dust. He carried the two separated corpses and put them neatly together in the two golden coffins. Then, the golden mist rose again and sealed the two golden coffins tightly. It was so seamless that not even a crack could be found. There were protruding lines on the front of the golden coffins. They were Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. Remember to tell them the truth when you go down, lest they die with everlasting regret. Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. He didn't dare to go any closer. The closer he got, the more he found that even his strong willpower was gradually wavering. Not long after he left, the one-armed old man rushed into the forest and landed. He looked around, and his gaze fell on the two new piles of soil. He slowly walked over and looked up at the words on the tree trunk thoughtfully. He didn't know what he was trying to express. The blue flying sword flew back into his sleeve. Yu Qianzhou's expression was cold. He didn't look back anymore and resolutely turned around. He walked to a nearby place, picked up the 9 heads with one hand, and flew out of the dense forest. Most of the cultivators who came here to trade could abide by the rule of not disturbing the world. This was also a rule that everyone in the cultivation world followed. Whether they came or left, everyone would come and go through this guarded canyon. Yu Qianzhou slightly shook his arm, and with a whoosh, the dried corpse turned into dust that scattered into the forest below. A complete head was in his hand. He absolutely couldn't let such a terrifying expert become the World Commerce Association's opponent. Niesheng instantly made the decision to abandon his 2 juniors. He turned around and sent a voice transmission to the remaining 4 juniors with difficulty. "Go. You guys go quickly. This Nyo Yud's cultivation is probably several levels higher than Master's. He's not someone we can deal with. Quickly go back and tell Master the news so that Master can prepare. Failure, pain, and sorrow took turns to strike at his heart. A wasted life made one sigh with emotion and feel powerless. His entire being gradually sank into a kind of despair, becoming more and more desperate. It was as if there was a voice calling out to him, telling him to let go of all his burdens and close his eyes to follow it. It was like the call of the grim reaper from the netherworld. Not feeling the other party's hostility, Yu Qianqiu flew towards the forest below. After he landed, he threw the 9 heads with their hair tangled together on the ground. Then, he flew around the forest again. The 4 masked men looked at the other 2 with a gaze that clearly asked, what should they do? There were only 6 guards left out of the 30. Because their cultivation wasn't high, they had already entered a semi-conscious state and were slowly becoming shorter. A hand just happened to reach out and grab the person's hairbun. The masked man emitted a cloud of white smoke with a whoosh and entered the hand that grabbed the person's hairbun. In the canyon, a few people left and a few people landed. It was originally a place where they wouldn't disturb each other. But at this moment, it caused a commotion. Those who wanted to leave stopped and looked at the person who had just landed on his sword. There was nothing special about this person, but the thing in his hand was relatively special. 9 heads with disheveled hair. In a daze, he thought back to the past and felt like he had never experienced anything worth being happy about in his life. But he knew that he clearly had, but he just couldn't remember it. The only thing he could remember was failure after failure, as well as every pain and sorrow. The sad past that he didn't want to remember appeared so clearly in his mind, as if it had just happened. Chapter 565. The few of them looked over and saw a person carrying a pile of items on the bluestone road outside. Behind him was a large group of people aggressively pressing over. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed like they were here to cause trouble. Damn it! Did this person come to the World Commerce Association to find trouble? Below, Sikong-ju, whose hair was slightly white, stood in the hall with his hands behind his back. The 4 disciples, Hu Tianbao, Zhang Zuanxing, Yang Rong, and Wang Luhui, were lying on their chairs with pale faces as they recounted the ambush on Nyo Yud. Especially when they talked about the scene where Nyo Yud showed his might. The 4 of them couldn't help but shiver. Under the continuous eaves of the World Commerce Association's Gold Casting City branch was a row of shops. They were all World Commerce's shops. There was definitely no other shop here. Even so, there was a wide variety of goods in the different categories of shops. That person couldn't see through his cultivation, plus Yu Qianqiu called him a junior and knew Niesheng. Not daring to pursue the matter further, he immediately soared into the sky and went to report in advance. I'm worried that Nyo Yud has already seen through it. Then your second senior brother, and the rest have probably already met with. Sikong-ju shook his head slightly and didn't say the word met with misfortune. A few cultivators were chatting in the spacious area when one of them unintentionally glanced outside and said blankly, "What are those people doing?" Yu Qianqiu raised the heads in his hand and said, "Before coming, Niesheng told me that he could exchange these 9 heads for 100 million high Great Spirit Stones from Sikong-ju. I don't know if it's true or not." "That's right. Niesheng is from your World Commerce Association, right?" A quick-witted person pulled the others and said in a low voice, "Let's get out of the way. Don't block the way. It's none of our business." The few of them looked at Sikong-ju and then at the approaching people and immediately came to a realization. "You don't need to feel uneasy." Sikong-ju sighed and said, "For what you've said, that Nyo Yud's cultivation isn't just a level higher than mine. Aura is the remnant power of cultivation. To be able to emit such a terrifying aura, I'm afraid that his cultivation isn't any weaker than your Grandmaster's. Looks like your eldest senior brother's words that day weren't made up to absolve himself from responsibility. I can only blame my poor judgment for harming 8th and 9th brother. I'm worried." The 10 disciples he had painstakingly trained had always been his right-hand men in handling the affairs of the World Chamber of Commerce. in order to complete the task assigned to him by his master embark. And in addition to the importance of the limit-breaking pill, he had brought all 10 of his strongest disciples with him. He did not expect that 2 of them would be gone in the blink of an eye. How could he not be heartbroken? There was one more that worried him. The 4 of them looked at each other. Hu Tianbao asked, "Master, what are you worried about?" That's right. That person was also sizing up Yu Qianqiu. When he realized that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his tone became slightly more polite. "I'm not sure either. In short, it's a bunch of bastards." Yu Qianqiu looked at the things in his hands and said indifferently, "These guys ambushed Niu Yud and Nie Sheng outside the ghost manor. Don't you think they deserve to die?" Whispers rang out in the valley. Someone actually brought 9 heads here. It seemed like he was trying to ruin the World Chamber of Commerce's business. What surprised everyone even more was that the scene in front of them showed that the dignified soul formation expert, the number 2 person of the World Chamber of Commerce, Sikongju, had come to meet this person. The group of people in the valley followed, behind Yu Qianqiu. Even those who were about to leave after finishing their business also returned to follow, wanting to see what would happen next. The group of people in the valley was in an uproar. The uproar was because they felt that this person was extremely arrogant. Who was Sikongju? He was the head disciple of the late soul formation expert embark. He himself was also an early soul formation expert and was the number 2 person of the World Chamber of Commerce. It was difficult for normal cultivators to meet such a person in the cultivation world. To let Sikongju know who he was without announcing his name, his background was probably not simple. This person was Sikongju's 3rd disciple, Mulianxiu. He gestured to his 4 junior brothers, indicating that there was no need to be overly courteous. He then walked to his master with a frown and cupped his hands, saying, "Master, I received a report from a disciple in the valley. Someone brought 9 heads to find you. He said that senior brother Nya asked him to bring them to you to exchange for a reward. He also said that you would know who he was after talking to him." Sikongju waved his hand and released a gentle force that pressed him back to his original position. He said, "Your body hasn't recovered yet. Sit and talk." That person's expression turned solemn. He had seen Nie Sheng bring a group of people to the ghost manor early in the morning. He didn't expect that they would be ambushed. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "I wonder if you can tell me your name so that I can report it." The person who came was actually familiar with Second Martial Uncle, so he naturally had to treat him seriously. "It should be Niu Yud." Sikongju turned to look at Mu Lianxiu with a sinister expression. Where is he? Even if they didn't know this person, they could guess who he was from how everyone addressed him. He was the famous soul formation expert of the World Commerce Association, Sikongju. What made them nervous was why was he staring at them? I hope so. Just as Sikongju let out a long sigh, they heard hurried footsteps coming from outside. When a middle-aged man came in, Hu Tianbao and the other 3 shouted, "Third martial brother." "He's reported to be walking over from the valley," Mu Lianxiu replied. As he spoke, he kept sizing up the 9 heads in the man's hand. Unfortunately, their faces were covered by messy hair. 2 of their faces were even covered by black cloth, so they couldn't see their faces clearly. He couldn't help but ask, "Whose heads are these 9 heads?" Sikongju could easily see the deep fear in his disciple's eyes. He pondered and said, "So that means that Niu Yud's cultivation has indeed reached the soul formation stage?" "That's right. With our strength, it's not worth the soul formation expert to look at us for so long." The few of them hurriedly moved to the sides. As long as you could afford it, you could buy almost anything here other than rare items that were hard to find in the world. Even if you didn't have something for the time being, as long as you paid a deposit, the goods could be transferred very quickly. There weren't many people here, but there were at least 100 cultivators wandering around. There were customers in front of the row of shops. In the middle of the shop was a large open door. There were people guarding it, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. "Master, forgive disciple for speaking bluntly." Hu Tianbao, who was sitting at the head of the table, struggled to stand up and speak. This was all thanks to the powerful trading network that the World Commerce Association had set up in the cultivation world. It lived up to its reputation. At the same time, there were shops that specialized in buying things. As long as it was something worth buying or selling, it would all be bought. The World Chamber of Commerce still had many branches like this throughout the cultivation world. Master, it shouldn't be as bad as you think. Hu Tianbao analyzed. With that Neo Yud's cultivation, he could have taken our lives effortlessly, but he didn't do so. Since he could even let us go, even if he saw some clues, he probably wouldn't make things difficult for second senior brother. Second martial uncle? That person's face was filled with respect, but when he heard this guy directly call his martial ancestor Sikongju's name, his face changed and his tone became a little stiff. That's right. Second martial uncle is the manager of this branch. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and his gaze fell on Sikongju. He snorted. I don't see any other soul formation cultivators here. You're the only one who barely makes it. Needless to say, you're Yin Baikong's eldest disciple. What's your name again? Actually, it would be strange if he could see through Sikongju's cultivation. But he could guess it even if he used his but. Not to mention, he had heard someone call Sikongju Senior earlier. Sikongju's heart thumped. Indeed, what he feared had come true. Hu Tianbao and the others looked at each other with pale faces. It's fine if I don't say my name. It's not something a junior like you has the right to ask. Yu Qianqiu's words were filled with arrogance. He glanced at him expressionlessly and said, Go tell Sikongju that I brought a few heads to claim my reward. He will naturally know who I am. Finishing, he carried the 9 heads and walked out of the canyon. When the spectators saw Yu Qianqiu, they were instantly dumbfounded. Speaking of killing people who hadn't done it before, but running around with heads in their hands, they really hadn't done it before. Not to mention running to the World Commerce Association with a bunch of heads. Many people looked at the dozen or so guards around the canyon. A person flashed down from the top of the canyon and landed in front of Yu Qianqiu. He said in a deep voice, The World Commerce Association welcomes friends from all over the world to do business. I wonder what does friend mean by bringing a few heads here? Thank you, Master. Hu Tianbao cupped his hands gratefully and said uneasily, Master, forgive disciple for speaking bluntly. I'm afraid Neo Yud's cultivation is even higher than Master's. In the inner hall of the Gold Casting City branch, Yin Baikong's portrait hung on the wall in the middle of the hall. From this portrait, he looked much more elegant than Yin Baikong himself. He had the air of an immortal. You're from the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and found that he was the same as him. He was also in the early stage of tribulation passing. The two of them walked to the center of the hall. When they were a few meters apart, they stopped and sized each other up. Yes. Hu Tianbao and the others accepted the order and stood up to walk towards the back of the hall. Let's go and take a look first. Just as the master and disciple walked to the door, Sikongju suddenly stopped and turned his head, saying, You 4, go hide in the secret room for now. Finishing, he quickly walked away. How could a person worthy of Sikongju's personal appearance be an ordinary person? Everyone immediately whispered to each other, trying to guess this person's background. Everyone also looked at Yu Qianqiu and found that he was indeed very unfamiliar. At this moment, they heard a wave of flattery coming from behind them. Senior Sikong was being called out nonstop. Looking back, they saw 2 people standing outside the large open door in the middle of the shop. The person standing at the front had white hair and a sinister expression as he looked over. People continuously went over to pay their respects, but this person remained indifferent and didn't move at all. He just stared straight at them. On the bluestone path between the canyon and the Gold Casting City branch, Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly walked in front with 9 heads in his hands. A group of people followed a few meters behind him. No matter how one looked at it, it was a little strange. The moment Yu Qianqiu stepped through the gate, Sikongju walked over. He didn't dare to be careless when facing such an expert. His gaze swept across the pile of heads in Sikongju's hands, and he immediately felt his chest tighten. Chapter 566. But when these words fell into other people's ears, it had a different meaning. He called Yin Baikong directly by his name and did not put Sikongju in his eyes at all. Everyone was shocked and looked at each other with questioning gazes before shaking their heads, indicating that they did not know who this person was. Mu Yanxiu could not take it anymore. Someone was looking down on his master. No matter how high the other party's cultivation was, if he did not say anything, how could he face others in the future? He took 2 steps forward and was about to scold Niu Yud, but Sikong-ju gently waved his hand to stop him. Sikong-ju sized Niu Yud up, and a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. Since he could not see through Niu Yud's cultivation, his previous guess was right. Niu Yud's cultivation was indeed higher than his. Sikong-ju greets Mr. Niu. Sikong-ju greeted him politely. He wanted to call him Brother Niu, but he could not figure out Niu Yud's level, so he could only call him Mr. Mr. Niu? Everyone immediately reacted. Who else could make Sikong-ju treat someone with the surname Niu so politely other than Niu Yud, who dared to raise the price at the ghost village to cheat the various countries? He's the ruthless judge, Niu Yud. He's a Niu Yud that the World Trade Association spent 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to invite? No wonder. The group of people discussed. He was Niu Yud himself? The people who came with Yu Qianshou to watch the show were stunned. They recalled what Niu Yud said in the canyon and looked at the pile of heads in his hand. They could not help but wonder who was so daring to attack the ruthless judge. They were really courting death. TSK, TSK. My eyes are pretty good. You are indeed Yin Baikong's eldest disciple. Yu Qianshou nodded. At this time, most of the group's gazes were fixed on the 9 heads, trying to identify who these people were. They actually dared to attack a soul formation cultivator. It was obvious. Someone who could make the World Trade Association spend 1 billion, and who could make Sikong-ju personally come out to welcome them, must be at the level of a soul formation expert. Mu Yanxiu looked at the 2 masked heads. His pupils constricted, and his breathing became a little chaotic. His hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, involuntarily clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. Other than sweeping a glance at the 9 heads that Yu Qianshou was holding, Sikong-ju did not look at them anymore. Glancing at the gazes of the crowd, looking at the 9 heads, a smile appeared on his usually sinister face. He did not mind Niu Yud's rude words as he waved his hand and said, Mr. Niu, your presence brings light to the world commerce. Please come in and speak, please. Their attitude was very courteous. The master and disciple stood on the left and right, giving way to the middle of the road. The standard of this welcome was not low. However, no matter how well he acted on the surface, no matter how much face he gave, it could not extinguish the rage Yu Qianshou felt when he buried Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing with his own hands. You dare to plot against me and touch my people? You better pay the price first. Yu Qianshou sneered in his heart, but on the surface, he was polite. However, his feet didn't move at all. He smiled and said, No hurry. Sikong-ju, is Niesheng your disciple? The master and disciple looked at each other and tried their best to hide the gloominess in their eyes. Then, Sikong-ju looked at the surrounding people, turned around, and nodded. That's right. He is my second disciple. I sent someone to receive Mr. early in the morning. Could it be that Mr. did not see him? That's good. I thought I met a swindler. Yu Qianshou muttered and turned around with a cold expression. He looked at the surrounding cultivators and said, On the way here, I was attacked by 6 late-stage tribulation-passing realm cultivators. I don't know which sect sent them. Everyone, please bear witness. Spread the news for me. If I, Niu Yud, find out who did it, I will twist his head off and use it as a urinal. Many people were in an uproar as they didn't expect such a thing to happen. However, when everyone thought about it, they felt that something was wrong. Wasn't it attacked by 6 late-stage tribulation-passing realm cultivators? Why are you carrying 9 heads in your hands? Sikong-ju and Mu Yanxiu were expressionless and naturally wouldn't admit that they did it. Mu Yanxiu even shouted solemnly, There's actually such a thing? You even dare to touch our world commerce's esteemed guest. You're simply looking down on our world commerce. Yanxiu. Yes, disciple. Mu Yanxiu cupped his fists. Immediately send a message to the various chambers of commerce. Use all our resources to investigate this matter. Find a mastermind and give Mr. Niu an explanation. Yes. Mu Yanxiu quickly turned around and left. Yu Qianqiu raised half of his eyebrows as he watched the master and disciple echo each other. After Sikong Ju passed the order, he frowned and asked, Mr. Niu, why didn't I see my disciple return with you? Could it be that my disciple has met with some mishap? It's like this, Yu Qianqiu explained. Those 6 attacking cultivators saw that the situation wasn't right and wanted to escape. I was in a rage, so how could I let them escape? Thus, I was prepared to take action personally. Who knew that Niesheng wouldn't dare to trouble me? He said that the World Commerce would offer a huge reward for the capture and that the attacking bandits wouldn't be able to escape. Sikong Ju's eyebrows twitched and said, What is this Niesheng doing? With Mr. taking action, it should be easy. Before he could finish speaking, Yu Qianqiu slapped his thigh and said, That's right. I told Niesheng at that time that since we were going to offer a reward for the capture, why let the money fall into the hands of others? I happened to be a little tight on cash, so I did not hesitate to take action and casually killed 2 of them. The surrounding people exclaimed in surprise. He was indeed an expert to casually kill 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. Sikong Ju's eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Yu Qianqiu continued in high spirits. After I brought the 2 heads back, I asked Niesheng how much they were worth. Niesheng said that I would be able to find out who the mastermind against the World Commerce was from these 2 people, and that the World Commerce would definitely not mistreat me. However, I'm a stubborn person and wanted him to state a price first. Otherwise, I would not give him the 2 heads. In the end, Niesheng decided that it was at least 100 million high-grade spirit stones. To be honest, I was very satisfied with this price and gave him the 2 heads immediately. 100 million high-grade spirit stones. The World Commerce is indeed wealthy. The surrounding people exclaimed in surprise again. Mu Yinxiu, who had just returned, had a taut expression and did not say a word after hearing this. Sikong Ju already knew the truth from his 4 disciples and wished he could tear Niu Yud's mouth apart for lying through his teeth. He let out a sigh and said, Does that mean that my disciple, Niesheng, is still alive? Sikong Ju, you are not a righteous person. Why do you change the topic when we talk about money? Yu Qianqiu asked unhappily. I only have one question for you. Does the 100 million high-grade spirit stones reward that your disciple, Niesheng, mentioned count? This. Sikong Ju suppressed his anger and forced a smile. Sir, there is no need to be anxious. 100 million high-grade spirit stones is not a small amount. When Niesheng returns, I will verify it with him. If he really said that, with the reputation of the World Commerce, we will not go back on our word. Does that mean you suspect that I'm lying? Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Looking at the situation, I don't expect to get the reward. Since that is the case, I will first find a mastermind who attacked me and settle the score. As he spoke, he pulled out 2 heads from the 9 in his other hand. They were the 2 masked heads. He raised them and walked around the crowd. I rarely walk around the cultivation world and do not have a lot of experience. I will now remove these 2 people's masks. I will trouble everyone to help me identify them and see which sect they are from to actually dare to attack me. Don't worry, I never mistreat my friends who help me. If anyone can help me identify them, I will give 10 limit-breaking pills as a reward. Sikong Ju and Mu Yinqiu's expressions changed drastically. This guy actually played this trick. He was too extreme. 10 limit-breaking pills? The group of people immediately became excited. There were many nascent soul cultivators here. What did 10 limit-breaking pills mean? It went without saying that it meant that they could successfully step into another realm that they had been searching for. Are you serious? Senior Niu, do you mean what you said? Yu Qianqiu waved the 2 heads in his hand and said in a loud voice, Even though I, Niu Yud, can't be considered to be a gentleman, I do as I say, and I never lie or deceive anyone. Senior Niu, if we recognize these 2 heads in front of everyone, we won't dare to say in front of everyone. Someone shouted out his misgivings. That's true. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He bent down and gently placed the head in his hand by his feet. However, he didn't let go of the 7 heads in his other hand. A hand appeared in the air and rummaged through his storage bag for a while. A large amount of bright red things appeared in front of everyone. The red mist lingered, and even under the bright sun, it couldn't cover it up. The red miasma also wrapped around Yuchincho's hand. Pill Halo. It's actually Pill Halo. Is this the legendary Pill Halo that only appears on the pills refined by top-grade pill refiner? Oh my god, it's really Pill Halo. Everyone's eyes lit up as they exclaimed. Mu Yinsho looked at his master and saw his master's pupils constricting as he stared at the Pill Halo in Nyo Yud's hand. As Yuchincho turned around, he held the Pill Halo in his hand and said, "These are limit-breaking pills. There are 20 of them, and as long as you recognize them, I'll cash them out on the spot. At the same time, I'm also worried that someone is deceiving me, so I'm willing to give the two of you a chance to check. As for what everyone is worried about, it's inevitable. It just depends on who is willing to take this gamble. I won't force it. I believe that even if no one recognizes these two heads today, someone will eventually recognize them. Everyone, do as you see fit." After he finished speaking, he stuffed the limit-breaking pills into his storage bag and bent over to remove the scars on the two heads. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Wait!" It was Sikong-ju. Yu Qinsho sneered in his heart, but he looked at Sikong-ju in surprise. "What's wrong? Don't you allow people to do this here? That's easy." So he lifted the two heads and waved at everyone. "Those who want the limit-breaking pills, follow me. Let's change places." Chapter 567. "Mr. Nyo, let me finish," Sikong-ju called out again. Yu Qinsho held 7 heads in his left hand and 2 heads in his right hand as he slowly turned around. "What do you mean?" To be honest, everyone in the cultivation world knows that Mr. Nyo likes spirit stones. Before Sikong-ju could finish, Yu Qinsho rolled his eyes and interrupted him. "Then find a cultivator who doesn't like spirit stones for me to see." "Mister, you misunderstood me," Sikong-ju said solemnly. "There is one thing I know. With Mister's cultivation and character, there is no need for you to lie. Since Mister said that my disciple, Nye Sheng, agreed to the 100 million bounty, then it must be true." It sounded a little self-justifying, but it was the truth. Of course it's true. Yu Qinsho nodded sincerely and waited for him to continue. Hearing this, Sikong-ju's expression twitched. He really couldn't hold it in anymore, but he had to endure it. He gritted his teeth and continued, "It's still the same thing. The world commerce's reputation is the most important. Since my disciple agreed to the 100 million bounty, as his master, I have to honor it." Everyone was in an uproar again. They thought that they had a chance to get 10 limit-breaking pills for free, and their blood was boiling. However, they were doused with a bucket of cold water. As long as one wasn't a fool, they could tell what Sikong-ju meant. He was going to take the 100 million bounty for these two heads. Mu Yinsho looked around unfriendly, and the uproar immediately disappeared. "That's not very good, right?" Yu Qinsho looked at everyone and muttered, "I just said that I would use 20 limit-breaking pills to ask everyone about the origins of these two people. Keep pretending." Sikong-ju resisted the urge to flare up again. He let out a breath and said, "I believe that it is best to leave the investigation of these two people to the world commerce." That's true. The world commerce has branches in various countries, so it is indeed very suitable to do this. However, Yu Qinsho said to everyone, "I still have to ask everyone's opinion in case someone says that I'm going back on my word. What does everyone think?" Everyone naturally hoped that Nyo Yud would continue to offer the restriction-breaking pill as a reward. Handing over the head to Sikong-ju wouldn't give them any benefits. But who would dare to go against Sikong-ju? He really wanted both money and face. Sikong-ju was so angry that he was laughing in his stomach. However, it couldn't be helped. His two disciples were well-known figures in the cultivation world. Once they showed their faces, they would definitely be recognized by a lot of people. Nyo Yud had gotten 300 million from him, and 200 million of it was the deposit to join the World Chamber of Commerce. Once he found an excuse, he would really lose both the person and the money. Furthermore, this madman dared to blatantly deceive the various countries. Was there anything he wouldn't do? Who would dare to do this without some backing? In short, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce did not dare to do what he did. If this madman used this as an excuse to start a fight with the World Commerce Association, who knew what the result would be. We can't lose the big for the small. Ju was rather suspicious. He didn't know if the World Commerce Chamber was right or wrong to offend this fellow, but he just felt that something was wrong. Everyone. Ju cupped his hands at the surrounding cultivators and said, "This matter is not that Mr. Neo went back on his words. It's just that this ambush was targeted at our World Commerce Chamber. Our World Commerce Chamber has the responsibility to investigate who is going against us. Please give me, Ju, some face and don't make things difficult for Mr. Neo. Why would I be in a difficult situation? Wouldn't it have been over if I had paid earlier? Why did I have to sell my face?" Yu Qinsho also looked at everyone apologetically. We don't dare. We should. The group of people had no choice but to give in. If they didn't give Ju face, someone would probably take care of them the moment they left. However, everyone more or less sensed that something was wrong, but they couldn't tell what was wrong. Mu Yinsho bit her lips lightly, and her face was slightly pale. Ju stared at Yu Qinsho, and there was something in his eyes. "Nyoyud, everyone knows that I've already done this. What else do you have to say?" Yu Qinsho wanted to laugh, but he couldn't hold it in. Thus, he smiled calmly and said, "Since you know that I like money, then I won't put on an act anymore. Shouldn't you give me the 100 million reward first before we talk?" Facing a soul formation expert, he still felt a little guilty. Right now, he believed in getting the money first. If anything happened, he was quite confident in his ability to escape. Everyone looked at each other and was really speechless at this Nyoyud. Ju was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control his tone and give the other party an excuse. He stared at Nyoyud in silence for a while. Then he took out a storage bag from his waist and threw it over without saying anything. Yu Qinsho's eyes lit up, and he reacted quickly by throwing the two heads in his right hand over as well. He caught the storage bag with his free hand and checked it. After realizing that the number was not bad, he put it away. Mu Yinshio teleported in front of her master and caught the two heads before moving to the side. After taking a look and confirming that it was her junior brother, she nodded at her master with trembling lips. Ju stared at Yu Qinsho like a hawk and said slowly, "Mister, how is my disciple, Niesheng? Why isn't he back yet?" He only had two guesses about Niesheng's outcome. Either he was killed by Nyoyud, or he was captured by Nyoyud. Sigh. Yu Qinsho shook his head and let out a long sigh. He picked up the 7 heads in his left hand and pulled them out with his right hand before throwing one over. Everyone was speechless. Even though they had cultivated for a long time, they had never seen someone throwing heads like this. Ju grabbed Niesheng's head with one hand, and his long hair fluttered without any wind, causing Niesheng's face to be clearly visible. Second senior brother, Mu Yinshio couldn't help but call out, "Nyoyud, you better give me an explanation." Ju yelled. He couldn't hold back his killing intent anymore and burst out. The entire place was filled with killing intent, which scared the surrounding people. A soul formation stage expert was showing his prowess. Yu Qinsho almost lost his footing due to the killing intent. Although he managed to stabilize himself, he felt that he couldn't breathe. His heart was gradually filled with anger. Using your power to suppress others? I want to see whether your early-stage soul formation aura is stronger or my netherworld ghost flame aura is stronger. Yu Qinsho squinted his eyes, and a horrifying aura surged out from his body, covering Ju like a raging wave. The temperature of the entire place instantly dropped to freezing point. It was clearly a sunny day, but there was a dense fog. Coldness, despair, death, and a series of extremely negative emotions filled the place. Ju, who was the main target of the horrifying aura, widened his eyes in horror. He actually trembled and took a step back. How could he have the energy to maintain his explosive aura? He was using all his strength to defend against the deathly aura that was devouring his life force. Mu Yinshio, who was too close to his master, was immediately implicated. His body trembled uncontrollably, and the two heads in his hands fell to the ground. The most unlucky ones were the surrounding cultivators. Although they weren't at the center of the netherworld ghost flame aura, it was the first time Yu Qianqiu had used the aura of the ghost flame on a soul formation stage cultivator. He wasn't confident, so his attack wasn't light. The cultivator's cultivation was far inferior to Mu Lianqiu's, let alone Sikongju's. At the very least, no one present had the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. How could they withstand it? All of them immediately fainted and fell to the ground. No one was spared. The shop assistants in the row of shops had already fallen to the ground. The shopkeeper's cultivation wasn't bad, but they were all leaning on the counter for support as they looked over in fear. Niu Yud was surrounded by deathly aura, as if he had just walked out from the netherworld. When Yu Qianqiu saw that Sikongju was actually forced to take a step back by his aura of the ghost flame, he instantly felt confident. He snorted and said, "Sikongju, how dare you yell at me? Are you tired of living?" Glancing at Sikongju's storage bag, he really wanted to use the star-absorbing technique to kill Sikongju and reap a sum of money. However, he held back after thinking about it. Sikongju looked at the large group of cultivators that had fallen to the ground. The shock in his heart was indescribable. At least, his master definitely couldn't suppress him to this extent with just his aura. If Niu Yud wanted to kill him now, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. So terrifying, such a terrifying aura. Just how high is this Niu Yud's cultivation? Sikongju calmed himself down and looked at Mu Lianqiu, who was on the verge of collapsing. He quickly said, "Mr. Niu, please don't misunderstand. I was being rude. We can talk things over. Please calm down for now. My disciple can't take your anger anymore." Oof. Yu Qianqiu snorted, and the eerie aura in the area instantly retracted into his body. The surroundings returned to being sunny under the blazing sun. Plop! Without that terrifying aura, Mu Lianqiu slumped to the ground. His face was pale as he gasped for breath under the sunlight. The shopkeepers in the shops also softened. At this moment, only Yu Qianqiu and Sikongju were still standing. The latter was indeed a soul formation expert. With his powerful cultivation, he quickly forced out the deathly aura in his body. Under the sunlight, it dissipated like ashes. Although he had recovered, he still looked at Yu Qianqiu with lingering fear. This person was too terrifying. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and threw the 6 heads to Sikongju's feet. Then, he spread his arms and a series of groans could be heard. Gray mist rose from the bodies of the cultivators that were lying on the ground and spiraled into Yu Qianqiu's body. Afterward, the group of people slowly woke up and struggled to get up while panting. All of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in fear. Chapter 568. The scene before they fainted would probably be unforgettable. The despair under the pressure and the bone-piercing coldness. They had never seen such power before. A true expert. Before even making a move, just his aura alone was unstoppable. Now, everyone finally understood why Niu Yud dared to offend the masses and brazenly swindle money in the ghost manner. He indeed had the ability to do so and wasn't afraid of anyone finding him for revenge. Mu Lianqiu stared at the heads on the ground in a daze. She recognized them all as her own people. Sikongju also stared at the 9 heads on the ground silently. 3 of them were his disciples. As the number 2 of the World Commerce Association, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? He clearly knew the murderer was in front of him, but he didn't even dare to mention revenge. That head is Niesheng's? Someone accidentally saw it and let out a cry of surprise. It attracted everyone's attention and everyone gasped. They finally understood why Sikongju flipped out at Niu Yud. His disciples were killed. Could it be Niu Yud? Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. "Everyone, don't look at me. I didn't kill them." Yu Qianqiu looked around and denied it. He coughed and explained, "After we were ambushed, we continued on our way. Who knew that we would be ambushed by a group of people? The people who ambushed us this time were extraordinary. One of them actually fought to a draw with me. Sigh, because I was held up by that person, I couldn't help Niesheng and the rest. In the end, I could only watch as they were harmed. Luckily, I used all my strength and managed to snatch back the heads of Niesheng and the rest. How shameful! After speaking, he glanced at the doubtful crowd. As for whether they believed him or not, it wasn't something he had to worry about. The key was to have an explanation so that Sikong Ju could step down. The scene was silent. Sikong Ju took a deep breath and said to Mu Lianxiu, "Keep the head and try to find a mastermind as soon as possible to take revenge for the dead disciple." Mu Lianxiu replied, "Yes." She picked up the head on the ground and left. "I was rude just now. I hope Sir doesn't take offense." Sikong Ju apologized with a gloomy expression. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was bleeding. After all, Niesheng is your disciple. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's get down to business. Yu Qianshou waved his hand generously. "Mister, please come in." Sikong Ju raised his hand. Yu Qianshou nodded and followed him into the inner hall. The group of people who were left behind looked at each other in dismay, and then hurriedly left. They had to inform the sect of what happened here in time. Baiwan Nation's capital, Orchid City, Greenhouse Restaurant. On the second floor, Yu Qianshou stood by the window of the bustling street with his hands behind his back, looking at the bustling crowd on the street. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan accompanied him carefully, not daring to disturb him. The Green Mansion restaurant was known as the best restaurant in Orchid City. A private room by the window like this one would be hard to find if one didn't make a reservation in advance. Guan Zhongkai had even asked the steward of the World Chamber of Commerce's Lan City branch to make a reservation in advance. The trio's destination for this trip was the World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters, Cornucopia. However, when they passed by Baiwan Nation, Yu Qianshou strongly requested to take a look there. Guan Zhongkai had seen his means, and in addition to the things that happened in the Gold Casting City branch, even his master suffered a loss. How could he dare to disobey him, and could only accompany him? Actually, Guan Zhongkai had to thank Yu Qianshou for being able to regain his freedom so quickly this time. Sikong Ju was originally prepared to personally accompany Yu Qianshou, but after those things happened, how could he be in the mood to accompany him? It was useless to accompany him. With the other party's cultivation, if he wanted to run away, there was no way to stop him. It all depended on whether the other party was aware of it or not. Sikong Ju also didn't want to be angered by Yu Qianshou again, so he found an excuse to rush back to the headquarters in advance and arrange for Mu Lianxiu to accompany him. However, Yu Qianshou specifically picked Guan Zhongkai, saying that he liked Guan Zhongkai's character. He was forthright and didn't get along with others. Sikong Ju was forced into a corner and could only restore Guan Zhongkai's freedom. However, he was more or less on guard and couldn't help but tell his eldest disciple, Guan Zhongkai, to be careful. When Yu Qianshou and Guan Zhongkai were about to leave the Gold Casting City branch, Yulan came to look for Guan Zhongkai. Yu Qianshou's eyes immediately lit up. He didn't expect that these two old enemies would be together. He immediately put on the airs of a senior and asked Yulan if she was willing to accompany him. Niu Yud had caused such a huge commotion in the Gold Casting City branch, and news of it had already spread throughout the cultivation world. Yulan had looked for Guan Zhongkai under orders to find out news of Niu Yud. He didn't expect to receive an invitation from Niu Yud, so he immediately asked his master. In the end, it attracted the attention of his master. Not only did they want him to accompany Niu Yud, but they also gave him some secret missions. It was because of this that the scene of the three of them at the Green Manor restaurant happened. They had just arrived. These flies are really annoying. I can't even finish swatting them. Yu Qianshou looked downstairs and snorted coldly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and looked out of the window. They saw two people sitting at the Liangpi stall opposite them, eating. They would occasionally look in their direction, but when they saw that the person upstairs was staring at them, they lowered their heads and continued eating. Two early-stage, tribulation, transcending cultivators. I'll go deal with them so that they don't disturb Senior's mood. Guan Zhongkai turned and went downstairs. He was already somewhat used to it. Along the way, there were too many people following them. When he and Yulan discovered them, they only gave them a warning. Who knew that Yu Qianshou would force the two of them to kill them? As long as there was an opportunity to kill them, he wouldn't let them go. These people following them were naturally sent by various factions. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were a little apprehensive when they wanted to kill them. Who knew that when Yu Qianshou saw the two of them hesitating, he bluntly said, "If you don't kill them, I'll kill you. Do as you see fit." Only then did the two of them remember that this smiling guy had a nickname, Ruthless Judge. They were quite frightened by his words and had no choice but to do as he said. Yulan was even more bitter after the incident. Why did they get on this pirate ship? Even if they got off the ship, they would still offend people from various countries with this massacre. What would they do in the future? Nonsense. Is this the place to make a move? Yu Qianshou coldly snorted. There will be plenty of opportunities. Let's talk about it after we leave Lan City. Hearing this, Guan Zhongkai obediently walked back and repeatedly admitted his mistake. "Senior, please don't blame me. I didn't think it through." Huh? Yu Qianshou was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and looked down. A few people walking over from the side of the street attracted his attention. They were all old acquaintances. The elegant Yan Zhuixing and a young master in snow-white clothes holding a white fan were walking side by side in front. From time to time, they would stop at various stalls. Man Hu and his martial brothers were behind them. At the very back, there were 4 plain-clothed guards holding sabers. The young master in white was none other than the princess of Baiwan Kingdom, Hipster, who was disguised as a man into Yang City. Why are these guys here too? Why are they together? Yu Qianshou muttered to himself. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were on both sides of the window, noticed Yu Qianshou's abnormality. They both stuck their heads out. The two of them weren't familiar with Yan Zhuixing and Hipster, but they knew Man Hu and his martial brothers. With their eyesight, they could naturally tell that the young master in white was a fake at first glance. The two of them also felt a little strange. They didn't know where this man and woman came from. They could actually make the disciple of Great Snow Mountain's Bing Chengzi be their follower. What made the two of them most curious was that Niu Yud's reaction seemed to know these people. The two of them were puzzled. Guan Zhongkai asked tentatively, "Senior, do you know them?" Yu Qianshou shook his head slightly and said, "I just feel that the combination of these people is a little strange. The 4 people in the middle are obviously at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. But why do they seem to be the followers of the 2 people in front? Could it be that there are as many people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage now? An ordinary person can casually grab a few of them to be his bodyguards?" His explanation was reasonable. Anyone who knew the ropes would find it a little strange. The two of them immediately had their doubts cleared. At the same time, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. A spirit-severing expert was indeed powerful. He could easily see through the cultivation of the 4 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Little did they know that it would be strange if Yu Qianshou could see through it. It was just that when he was in the Chinese cultivation world, he already knew that Man Hu and his martial brothers were at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Guan Zhongkai said with a flattering tone, "Although I don't know the 2 people in front, I know the 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Do you want me to call them up and ask them?" "Forget it." Yu Qianshou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "It's just 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. It's not worth worrying about." Guan Zhongkai, who was also at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, froze and shut up immediately. Under the gazes of the 3 people, they found that this group of people had also broken into the Green Mansion restaurant. After Wen Lanfeng suppressed the 6 experts at the final stage of the spirit-severing stage, his words of support for Yu Qianshou made Yan Zhuixing ponder for a long time. He couldn't figure out when Yu Qianshou was related to Wen Lanfeng. As for what Wen Lanfeng said about admiring Yu Qianshou's talent, he didn't believe it. Nobody would believe it, let alone him. They all guessed that there was some relationship between the 2 of them. Or, when Lanfeng wanted to monopolize the treasure left by the demon monarch of swords in the Mist Forest, so he used the 6 experts to show off. After the battle that shocked the cultivation world, Bing Chengzi finally told Yan Zhuixing about the secret of the demonic book. Yin Juexing also finally understood why this master and disciple would do their best to help him. Later, Bing Chengzi invited Yin Juexing to Dirong Nation, but he refused. The hero in Yu Qianzhou's hands could cause chaos in various countries. The amazing strength it showed made him coveted. He believed that with the information he had, he was confident that he could take Yu Qianzhou's hidden strength under his command. He always felt that it was a wonderful feeling to meet Yu Qianzhou in Baiwan Nation, as if it was a kind of fate that he couldn't explain. Therefore, he decided to wait in Baiwan Nation. If his feeling was wrong and he couldn't meet Yu Qianzhou, he would go to the World Chamber of Commerce before the cornucopia to see the famous event in the cultivation world. Chapter 569. Seeing that Yin Juexing insisted on staying, Bing Chengzi didn't insist. He just told Man Hu and the others to protect him. He also left 3 jade pendants for Yin Juexing, so that he could summon Yin Juexing for help when he encountered a threat that he couldn't resolve. After seeing Bing Chengzi off, Yin Juexing's confidence was greatly boosted. In the past, he was worried that the master and disciple were using him, so he had some scruples in his heart. He didn't expect that there was such a hidden story. He was actually the only successor of ancient diabolism in the human world, and he shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving diabolism. During the time he wandered around Lan City, he met a domineering child with Man Hu and the others by chance, and they had some small conflicts. This child was obviously a fake, but he thought that others couldn't see through him. He wanted to beat him up, but he didn't expect that the cuffs of this fake were embroidered with the symbol of Baiwan country's royal family, which is a thumb-sized, lifelike dark green orchid. With the experience of Man Hu and the others, it wasn't difficult to guess the identity of this fake. Moreover, she was followed by 4 guards, who couldn't be compared to the guards of ordinary rich families, so her identity was obvious. Yin Juexing was quite interested in the Wen clan, so he made some effort to make friends with the hipster. As for what he wanted to do, only Yin Juexing himself knew. Today, the 2 of them made an appointment to have fun again. The hipster was good at playing, and they almost visited half of Lan City. After playing for half a day, the hipster finally felt a little tired. Coincidentally, the best restaurant in Lan City was nearby, so she excitedly pulled Yin Juexing and the others into the restaurant. Yin Juexing was a little surprised when he walked in. He looked around and didn't expect to see such an elegant and quiet restaurant in this busy city. The 100 Flowers House in the 100 Flowers Valley was a famous restaurant in the cultivation world of China, but he didn't know when he would see it again, which made him feel a little emotional. Hipster had already slammed the counter with a pong-pong sound. "Shopkeeper, I want the best private room." He really did sound like a boorish and forthright man, but his voice seemed a little too weak. The manager, who was smiling at her, was slightly stunned. He also realized that the hipster was a woman dressed as a man. He didn't expose her, but squeezed out a smile and said, "Sir, you really came at a bad time. The best private room is already occupied. Do you want me to check if there are any other seats?" Wen Qing's pretty face tightened. She was a descendant of the heavens, and when she lost her temper, even the current emperor had to listen to her. Well, had she ever done something like taking a step back? A small restaurant actually dared to reject her request. Just as she was about to fly into a rage, she turned her head to look at the elegant Yin Juexing. In order not to ruin her image, she forcefully suppressed her rage. He left the counter and waved the fan in his hand. The guards at the back understood. One of them stepped forward and secretly took out a golden token. He waved it at the manager and said in a deep voice, "Manager, please ask the guests in the private room to move aside. We will compensate them double for their losses." When the shopkeeper saw the golden token, his expression changed. This was not the first time he had encountered something like this. He was experienced and knowledgeable, so he could tell at a glance that it was a token from the Imperial Palace. The guest in front of him was actually a distinguished guest from the Imperial Palace. As a merchant, how could he dare to offend the nobles in the palace? He nodded repeatedly and bowed. "I have eyes but failed to see. I'll go ask the guests in the box to give up their seats." Wait a minute. Wait a minute." After saying that, he immediately ran upstairs. "Brother Yin, I'm really sorry for spoiling your mood. Wen Qing held a fan and apologized to Yan Juexing. Looking at her appearance, she seemed to care about Yan Juexing's feelings. Yan Juexing smiled gently and said, "It's all right." Man Hu and his brothers looked at each other and smiled, not saying a word. Some things were just so coincidental. The people in the so-called best private room were none other than Yu Qianqiu and the other two. Just as the dishes were being served, the shopkeeper walked in with a smile and waved away the waiters who were serving the dishes. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Distinguished guests, I'm really sorry. I might have to trouble you to change your seats." "Change seats?" Guan Zhongkai was startled and said, "What do you mean?" He didn't understand at once. Looking out the window, Yu Qianqiu had some guesses in his heart. The princess of Baiwan country had arrived, and this was the best private room in the green residence. "I'm afraid it's related to that girl." The shopkeeper smiled bitterly and said, "I hope the distinguished guests can understand. It's really because a few distinguished guests from the palace have come and specifically asked for this private room. I have no choice but to do this. But don't worry, after changing seats, we won't charge a single cent for all expenses. It's all free." He also knew that customers who could afford to eat in such a high-class place wouldn't care about that little bit of money. What they ate was their mood. He could only bring up the distinguished guests from the palace and hope that they would back off in the face of difficulties, so as to avoid any unpleasantness. It's business. It's better to avoid trouble. Harmony makes money. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. As expected, it's related to that girl. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan's expressions changed at the same time. This was too much of a slap in the face. With their status in the cultivation world, it was the first time that they were forced to give up their seats for a meal in the secular world. However, Wen Lanfeng was quite powerful in the cultivation world today. Even the secular mortals of the Wen family enjoyed the protection of Wen Lanfeng, so they couldn't casually provoke him. If it were any other time, they would endure it and get over it. But today, it wasn't just them, there was also Nyoyid here. It was really a dilemma for the two of them. The shopkeeper saw that the two of them didn't look too good and knew that it wasn't good for the guests to say something like lowering their heads. So he comforted them with kind words. "Hey, we can't afford to offend the emperor. Everyone, don't take it to heart. I'll arrange a better place for you." Just as he was about to turn around, he heard someone say, "People from the palace? Is it someone from the Wen family?" The shopkeeper turned around and saw that it was the person who had his back to him and was looking out the window. Looking at the situation in the room, this person was the one who could call the shots. He immediately replied, "It should be someone from the royal Wen family. The guard is holding a token from the palace. Go tell them that even if the emperor of the Wen family comes, he won't dare to disturb me. Tell them to wait on the side and don't look for trouble," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Others might be afraid of Wen Lanfeng, but he really wasn't. The shopkeeper was surprised. Someone actually dared to say such treasonous words in the capital of Baiwan nation. If they weren't crazy, then they had a powerful background. But looking at these people, they clearly weren't crazy. Could there be someone more powerful than the emperor? This. The shopkeeper didn't know what to say. He had never seen someone who didn't even give face to the royal family. Seeing that Niu Yud had stood up for them, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had nothing else to say. The latter said in a deep voice, "Hurry up and go." The shopkeeper suddenly felt his scalp go numb. He felt that he was in big trouble today. Neither side was easy to deal with. After responding, he didn't even know how he went downstairs. When he saw the people downstairs, he thought that he definitely couldn't afford to offend the royal family. So he simply pushed the responsibility away and said to the guard with a bitter face, "I told the guests upstairs your identity, but they still refused to give up their seats." Yan Juexing, Man Hu, and the others looked at each other and felt a little strange. There were mortals in the secular world who dared to not give face to the royal family? Could it be people from the cultivation world? Wen Qing's pretty face turned cold and said, "There's such a thing? Which family is so arrogant? Go, throw them out for me." The princess's temper completely exploded. Two guards immediately rushed upstairs, but after a while, they didn't even hear the sound of fighting. They saw two people directly thrown down from upstairs, knocking over two tables in the lobby. They lay on the ground motionless, and no one knew whether they were dead or alive. They had already made their move. Without waiting for the scholar, whose face had turned green, to say anything else, the other two guards pulled out their sabers with a schwa sound. They bent their knees and jumped straight up to the second floor. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, the two guards would be thrown down the stairs along with their swords. The guests who were able to eat in this kind of place were people who were used to seeing scenes. They didn't panic when they saw people fighting. Instead, they surrounded with interest to watch the show. The shopkeeper secretly gave a glance to a waiter. The waiter understood and ran to report to the authorities. "Rebel, rebel." Wen Qing's sharp voice roared. "Brother Wen, don't be anxious." Yan Zhuixing smiled and patted Wen Qing's shoulder. Wen Qing's body trembled and his cheeks turned crimson. As expected, he didn't roar anymore. Yan Zhuixing looked at Man Hu. The latter nodded and lightly jumped up. As if he was taking a stroll in the courtyard, he landed on the second floor and pushed open the door that had already thrown out the four guards. Man Hu's elegant movements immediately won the applause of the entire hall. It was obvious that he was much more skilled than the four guards. Many people praised good martial arts. Wen Qing's eyes were shining as he looked at Yan Zhuixing. He didn't expect Yan Zhuixing to have such an expert by his side. He was even better than the Imperial Guards. He didn't know where Yan Zhuixing came from. Everyone stared at the door upstairs. This time, they didn't see any movement like the previous two times. After waiting for a while, they saw Man Hu open the door and come out. He turned around and bowed to the inside. Then, he gently closed the door. TSK. The group of people who were watching the show suddenly felt bored. They thought they could see a big show. Who knew that it was a good-looking but useless pushover who actually went up and bowed to them. Yan Zhuixing and the others were surprised. Who exactly was upstairs? How could Man Hu be so respectful to them? The innkeeper's mouth opened. It seemed that the person inside wasn't simple. He could actually make the Imperial Guards bow to him. What was his background? Man Hu jumped down and shouted to the innkeeper. Innkeeper, quickly serve the guests upstairs. Then, he walked to the side of the few people and said, "It's Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du." The three juniors looked at each other in confusion. Old Seven frowned and said, "Isn't it Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du? Does eldest senior brother need to give them face?" Wen Qing looked at them strangely. He didn't know who they were talking about. Man Hu shook his head and said, "If it was just the two of them, it wouldn't be a problem. The key is that Niu Yud is also inside." While they were talking, Yu Qianshou, who was upstairs, looked at the two people walking down the street. The corner of his mouth twitched. What made him even more dumbfounded was that the two people actually barged into the Green Mansion restaurant. Chapter 570. There were strange things every year, but there were many this year. Yu Qianshou was speechless. The two people who came in just now were not strangers. One was Wen Chongzheng, the second son of Wen Yiyuan, the Pingxin king of Baiwan, and the other was Mr. Nongzhu from the famous purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Yu Qianshou couldn't figure out how these two guys got together. They didn't match at all, but it was understandable. The scene where Wen Chongzheng mistook him for Mr. Nongzhu was still vivid in his mind. Presumably, when he saw the real Mr. Nongzhu, he would worship him like an ancestor. His guess was right. It was true. Nongzhu hadn't been to Lan City for a long time. He just sneaked out from Lanfeng's place to have a look, and the streets were full of distinguished people. His appearance, which could charm women to death, was too conspicuous on the street, causing the women on the street to frequently turn their heads, their bashful eyes flying all over the sky, enough to drown a person to death. He was used to this kind of thing and didn't take it seriously at all. As he strolled, he didn't expect to meet Wen Chongzheng, who was with a group of scoundrels. In fact, Nongzhu had forgotten who this guy was, but when Chongzheng had seen him in Daong Kingdom, when Chongzheng dreamed of flattering such a person every day, how could he forget him? He immediately left his group of scoundrels and shamelessly came up to introduce himself, saying that they had met in Daong City, that he was the son of someone, and that he was willing to work for him. Nongzhu finally remembered who this guy was. He did see him in the embassy of Baiwan in Daong City. Since he was a member of the Wen family and was willing to work for him, she didn't embarrass him. Anyway, It was not bad to have a free guide. So he was brought here by Wen Chongzheng while they were strolling. It was necessary to bring him here. This was the best restaurant in Lan City, so Wen Chongzheng naturally had to bring Mr. Nongzhu to the best place. Otherwise, how could he live up to Mr. Nongzhu's identity? Niuyid? Why is he here? Yes. Why are Guan Zhongkai and Yulan here with him? Yan Juexing, Old Seven, and the others were indeed a little surprised. Niuyid's recent limelight in the cultivation world was no less than Wen Lanfeng's. Who would have thought that they would meet here? I was on my way to the World Chamber of Commerce and passed by here. Man who explained. Hipster asked with a confused face. Who are you talking about? Why haven't I heard of it before? However, all of them were deep in thought, and none of them paid any attention to her, causing her to pout unhappily. However, after glancing at Yan Juexing, she endured it. At this moment, two people came in through the door. One of them shouted, "Manager, hurry up and give me the best private room. If you're late, I'll make you pay." The few of them looked over and were stunned. Only Yan Juexing did not recognize any of them. Wen Chongzheng was obviously a regular here, and the shopkeeper also knew him. He immediately ran over with a bitter face and saluted. "Little prince, you're here. That box has already been occupied. He couldn't finish his sentence. He was depressed. Why were all the people who came today so tough? What should he do? The people in the box even dared to attack the people from the palace. He really didn't know if they would give face to the little prince. When Chongzheng was about to get angry, but he found Hipster staring at him. They were stunned at the same time and almost said in unison, "Why are you here?" When Man Hu and his brother saw Nongzhu, they were even more stunned. Why did Mr. Nongzhu, who was famous in the cultivation world, come here? Nongzhu also looked at these guys with a tired face. When Hipster saw Nongzhu walking leisurely behind Wen Chongzheng, her face suddenly changed. She hurriedly bowed and saluted. "Hipster greets Mr. Nongzhu." She was frightened by the fake Nongzhu that Yu Qianshou had impersonated. Although the real Nongzhu did not do anything to her, after she returned, her father, the emperor, was still furious because of that matter. If Wenbai hadn't pleaded for her, she would have been beaten to death by her father. She had never seen her father so angry with her. It was very scary. After being severely punished, she was grounded for a month. She finally understood what her uncle Wen Yuan said to her in Daong City. "If you offend Mr. Nongzhu, even your father can't protect you." Hearing Hipster's words, Yan Juexing was stunned. He didn't expect that this person was Mr. Nongzhu, the owner of the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. His eyes flashed. No wonder he was the most handsome man in the cultivation world, Mr. Nongzhu. His style was unparalleled. Man Hu and the others were also stunned. They didn't expect this woman to know Mr. Nongzhu. Although they were a little unhappy because they had been defeated by Nongzhu's disciple, they didn't dare to be disrespectful. After all, Nongzhu's cultivation was obvious. They immediately went over and saluted. "Greetings, Mr. Nongzhu." Yan Juexing naturally followed. "You little guys, why are you here?" "You're welcome." Nongzhu waved his hand casually. He was naturally qualified to call Man Hu and the others little guys. When the shopkeeper heard Hipster refer to herself as Hipster, he was startled. It turned out that this woman who came from the palace dressed as a man was actually the current princess. Who is this Mr. Nongzhu? Even the princess had to salute him. After knowing the identity of Hipster, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "Greetings, Your Highness." The group of onlookers also understood that it was the princess. So the people kneeling on the ground greeted the princess. When Chongzheng, who was standing aside, was suddenly in high spirits. It couldn't be better to meet the princess here. Once the princess brought the news that he was with Mr. Nongzhu back to the palace, it would definitely cause a great uproar. Even if he had nothing to do with Mr. Nongzhu, who would dare to look down on him? Just as he was holding back his excitement, he suddenly saw Mr. Nongzhu frowning at the people kneeling on the ground. He immediately woke up and hurriedly shouted to the shopkeeper, "Shopkeeper, clear these people out of here immediately." Hipster also noticed Nongzhu's reaction. He immediately raised his hand to the crowd and said, No need to be so polite. Get up. The group of people thanked the princess and got up. They saw the shopkeeper leading a group of waiters to get rid of the crowd. They didn't even take the money, but just urged the crowd to leave. Some people were not happy at first, but when they thought that the princess was here and the little prince was here, no one dared to disturb them. They left immediately. This was the difference between the common people and the nobles. Obviously, Nongju didn't expect that eating would make such a big noise. His face was slowly showing his unhappiness. When Chongzheng was shocked, he shouted to the shopkeeper again, "Shopkeeper, have you cleared the box I asked for? Take us there quickly." The shopkeeper was about to cry. The people upstairs even dared to beat the princess's people. He didn't dare to offend them. He had to bow to Hipster for help. "Your Highness, please say something." Hipster glanced at Nongju. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Even the emperor was afraid of this person. He must be able to deal with the people upstairs. Thus, he pulled on Wenchongzheng's sleeve and obediently complained, "Brother Wang, the best private room has already been occupied by someone, and they even beat up my guards. Look." He looked at the lobby where Hipster was pointing. He didn't notice it if he didn't look carefully. There were 4 people lying on the ground. He didn't know whether they were alive or dead, who had eaten leopard's gall to actually dare to hit the imperial guards. When Chongzheng was about to get angry, but he felt that something was wrong. His sister was an unruly princess. Would it be a good thing if she was bullied? How could she stand there without any reaction and complain to him? Ghost. When Chongzheng looked at Nongju, Nongju also felt a little strange. Someone dared to bully the princess in the capital. This was when Lanfeng's territory. Even ordinary cultivators wouldn't dare to do this. She looked at Manhu and asked, "Manhu, what's going on? Who's in the box upstairs? Is it the ice old man in your house?" "That's not right. Didn't he go back to the Great Snow Mountain?" He was sure that Manhu and the others already knew who the person upstairs was. Since they could mix with the princess, they were Bing Chengzi's disciples. Their guts weren't small. They couldn't watch the princess being bullied. Now they all stood there indifferently. Obviously, they had met a tough guy. Manhu paused and cupped his fists. It's Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. They're accompanying Senior Nyo inside. Nongju said suspiciously. "Senior Nyo? Is Nyo yet upstairs?" She had heard from Lanfeng that Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had accompanied Nyo Yud to the World Chamber of Commerce. After all, this matter was now known by everyone in the cultivation world. Naturally, she guessed it was Nyo Yud. "It's Senior Nyo Yud," Manhu replied. Hipster, Wen Chongzheng, and the shopkeeper had never heard of these names. They didn't know where these big shots came from. They were all confused. However, Nongju's eyes lit up. She wanted to meet this mysterious Nyo Yud to see who he was. He actually dared to make such a big move in the cultivation world. He was really bold. She didn't expect to meet him here. She turned to look at Wen Chongzheng and found that although this guy liked to flatter, he was still a good person. Speaking of which, she had to thank this guy. Otherwise, she would have to go to the World Chamber of Commerce if she wanted to see the mysterious Nyo Yud again. She laughed and said, "Nyo Yud is here? I'd like to go up and see." "Sir, do you want me to go up with you?" When Chongzheng nodded and bowed, Nongju's admiring look just now made him feel as if he was injected with chicken blood. He was suddenly in high spirits. Seeing Nongju waving her hand, he quickly and obediently retreated to the side. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of orderly running outside. From the sound, there were probably dozens of people. Then someone shouted, "Surround this place. Don't let the beating bandits escape." It turned out that after the shop assistant reported the case, the arresting officers had arrived. Nongju looked back and frowned. She pointed to Wen Chongzheng and said, "Boy, let the officers outside guard the door and don't let anyone in to disturb us. If you mess up, you'll be in trouble." Yes. When Chongzheng nodded repeatedly. He thought it was Nongju's honor to do this, so he ran out eagerly. With his identity as a young prince and the princess inside, it was naturally easy to settle this matter. Nongju was neither too fast nor too slow. She slowly walked up the stairs with her hands behind her back. Chapter 571. Nongju from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest is here to pay a visit. Nongju stood in front of the door and introduced herself. She didn't care if the people inside agreed or not. She pushed the door open and went in. As soon as she went in, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan both bowed and said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Nongju." Nongju waved her hand, and her eyes fell on the back of the figure at the window. This figure was so familiar, and that arrogant posture, she had seen it more than once or twice. It was exactly the same as someone. Nongju's face gradually darkened, and she said in a low voice, "Get out of here, both of you." Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They knew she was talking about them. The strange thing was that Nongju was polite just now. Why did she turn hostile in the blink of an eye? But from what she said, Nongju seemed to know Niu Yud. They didn't go out immediately. Instead, they looked at Niu Yud. To them, Niu Yud was much scarier than Nongju. Yu Qianqiu looked out of the window and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Was there a need to say it? Nongju obviously recognized him at a glance. It was not easy to hide one's identity in front of familiar people. "You go out first. I have something to say to Mr. Nongju," Yu Qianqiu said calmly. "Yes." Guan Zhongkai and Yulan retreated respectfully, closing the door behind them. Nongju's face twitched. What was going on? Yin Baikong's disciple and Shangguan Taiping's disciple were so obedient to Yu Qianqiu. Nongju was speechless when she thought of the three enemies fighting in Daon Kingdom. This guy really knew how to torment people. After setting up a sound barrier in the room, Nongju sat in front of the table and said coldly, "I was wondering where Niu Yud came from. So it's you. Should I call you Niu Yud or Yu Qianqiu?" In fact, he had long suspected that Niu Yud was Yu Qianqiu. It was just that the rumor that Niu Yud was a soul formation expert made him unconvinced. This time, in addition to the commotion that Niu Yud had caused in the gold casting city branch, the eerie aura that threatened Sikongju made Nongju even more suspicious that he was Yu Qianqiu. Others might not know, but he had experienced it before. He was one of the few people who knew about Yu Qianqiu's netherworld ghost flame. Now that he saw Niu Yud in person, he had even less doubts. Who else could it be but that kid? But then again, if Niu Yud's deeds were not so similar to the Yu Qianqiu that Nongju knew, even if she saw Niu Yud, she would not be able to insist that he was Yu Qianqiu. After all, there were many people with similar figures in this world. Who dare to say that people with similar figures must be the same person? It was unreasonable. Yu Qianqiu looked around outside the window and closed it. He turned around and bowed. "Senior Nongju, long time no see. I missed you so much." As he spoke, he fiddled with the dishes on the table and filled the empty cup in front of Nongju with wine. "Come on, you missed me?" Nongju sneered. "I'm afraid you can't wait for me to scram as far away as possible." Yu Qianqiu chuckled, not minding it. The two of them bickering would not hurt their relationship. He had to be thick-skinned to deal with this old fox, or else he would be the one to suffer. After downing a cup of wine, he sat opposite Nongju and asked, "Is Fu Rong still on Shuntian Island? How is she now? Is she not used to it?" When he mentioned Fu Rong, Nongju thought of Zi and felt flustered. She replied indifferently, "Your master treats her much better than you. He personally gave her a middle-grade spiritual treasure and has approved her to live on Shuntian Island. With the protection of the world's #1 master, who can live a better life than her?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Why did he hear a hint of jealousy in Nongju's words? He did not care about Nongju's feelings. He patted his chest carefully and breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. That's good. I was worried that my master would be unhappy and would not allow Fu Rong to live on Shuntian Island." As he spoke, he stood up again and walked to Nongju, making a deep bow. He said with unprecedented sincerity to Nongju, "Senior, thank you for taking care of Fu Rong for me. I, Yu Qianqiu, will remember this favor and will definitely repay it in the future." Nongju was stunned. She had never seen this guy so sincere to her. Just because of that silly girl? What's so good about that silly girl? How can she be better than my Z? He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked disapprovingly, "Look at how serious you are. Is hibiscus really that good? Why can't I see it? Tell me, what's so good about that silly girl?" There was no need to mention how depressed he was in his heart. No matter if it was in terms of appearance or anything else, his daughter Z, he was clearly superior to Furong. But it was strange that this guy, who was obviously not a good person, was so concerned about that girl and took care of her. What made him even more puzzled was that even Bai Changchun had taken a liking to that silly girl. Yu Qianqiu shook his head contentedly. There's nothing good or bad about it. Like you said, she's just a silly girl. She's so silly that no matter what I do, she's willing to follow me. This is enough for me to cherish her. There's no other reason. Nongzhu was speechless, but she looked at Yu Qianqiu thoughtfully. Hey, did you say that my master gave Fu Rong a middle-grade spiritual treasure? Yu Qianqiu finally realized that he had forgotten this because he was thinking about Fu Rong. He remembered that when he asked his master for it, his master said that he didn't have it. Based on his master's character, he wouldn't lie to him. Alas! Nongzhu sighed. Nanming failed to refine an upper-grade spiritual treasure, so he settled for the second best and made it a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Your master has no use for it, so he gave it to Fu Rong. Alas! With old Bai's cultivation, it's not a good thing to go to the East Holy Land without a suitable weapon. Failed. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Then he patted his forehead and said as if he thought of something, I have a few good things here, but I don't know if my master can use them. Then he took out a sword from his storage bag and handed it to Nongzhu. Senior, please show it to my master and see if he can use it. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. After taking the sword, her eyes suddenly lit up and she couldn't help but exclaim. She stood up and stroked the sword. The sword was cold to the touch, and there were undecipherable ancient patterns on it. The whole sword didn't look luxurious, and it looked very low-key and old. But with Nongzhu's cultivation, she immediately felt that there was a huge momentum inside it. Once it was activated, it would be invincible. Good sword. Nongzhu couldn't help but praise it. She held it in her hand and shook it. She wanted to test its power, but found that she couldn't control it. When she injected her divine sense into it to check, she couldn't help but gasp. What a powerful remnant divine sense. It can actually resist the invasion of my divine sense. I can't even expel it with my cultivation. Then she suddenly raised her head and stared at Yu Qianqiu with a solemn face. She asked, This sword is definitely comparable to a top-grade spiritual treasure. Brat, tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, Of course it's my sword. If it's not mine, how can I give it to my master? Don't talk nonsense with me. A cold light flashed across Nongzhu's hand and rested on Yu Qianqiu's neck. She narrowed her eyes and said threateningly, This sword obviously has an owner, but its spiritual mind has been damaged, which means that the original owner of this sword is no longer in this world. Even so, such a powerful remnant divine sense is definitely not something you can have. I didn't expect that there was someone with such a high cultivation in this world. Tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Before Yu Qianqiu could answer, Nongzhu suddenly understood and said, I see. You pretended to be me, and now you pretended to be Niu Yud. I guess the original owner of this sword is a person named Niu Yud. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought that this guy's imagination was too rich. Seeing that there was no way to deny it, he honestly pointed to the sky. What do you mean? Nongzhu asked suspiciously. Alas, I'm afraid you won't believe me even if I tell you. Yu Qianqiu gently pushed away the sword on his neck and said with a wry smile, I got this sword in the Mist Forest. It belongs to an immortal in the immortal world. Can you believe it? Mist Forest. Nongzhu suddenly became energetic and said excitedly, Yes, I heard that you were able to break into the Mist Forest. Your master even asked me to ask you what's going on. Tell me quickly, what's the matter with the treasure left by the Demon of Swords? He casually pulled a chair and sat down. My master asked you to ask this? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head awkwardly. He knew that no matter how ridiculous Nongzhu was, she would never use his master, Bai Changchun, to talk nonsense. It was most likely that his master really asked him to ask. Generally speaking, although Nongzhu was not a good person, she was still trustworthy when it came to serious matters. But the key point was that he made up the name of the Demon of Swords. An honest person like him could not possibly admit that he was lying. After thinking for a while, he felt that it was not a big deal. He only said that because he was forced to fight back. He did not do anything wrong. Hence, from a moment he was hunted down to the moment he charged into the misty forest, he recounted everything he had seen and heard. However, he still concealed the fact that he had the golden bead to detoxify the poison. It was the only thing that could save his life. As a person drifting in the world, he had to leave a way to protect himself. Yu Qianqiu described the process of being chased as extremely miserable. It was simply a path of blood and tears. It was as pitiful as one could imagine. In the end, he was forced into a dead end and risked his life to break into the horrifying mist forest. Nongzhu was sometimes moved, and sometimes her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Just imagine, if he was not forced into a dead end, who would dare to take the risk of breaking into the mist forest? Nongzhu snorted coldly and said, "For the sake of two imaginary treasured sabers, the countries actually did such a thing. They are really obsessed." She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and scolded, "You're a pig. You've already been forced into such a situation. Why don't you use your master? Isn't Old Man Bai's name used to scare people? Let's see who dares to touch you." Chapter 572. Motherf *Ker. You make it sound good. You know I'm by Chongqun's disciple. Well, have I ever scared you? Yu Qianqiu cursed silently. But he said proudly, "They're just a bunch of scums. There's no need to bring up my master." Nongzhu couldn't help looking at his arrogance. She thought to herself, like master, like disciple. Although this kid's character is not good, he is similar to Bai Chongqun in some ways. No wonder old Bai accepted him as his disciple. When she heard Yu Qianqiu say that he killed more than 2,000 cultivators without even blinking, Nongzhu was even more shocked. Nongzhu secretly clicked her tongue. Old Bai was indeed cruel and merciless. Nongzhu was dumbfounded and shook her head in disbelief. The legendary Immortal Ascension stage is in the Mist Forest. Unbelievable. So the colorful fog is called the Soul Transforming Smoke. Even an immortal can't resist it. It's really vicious. By the way, why aren't you afraid of the Soul Transforming Smoke? Who knows? If you ask me, who should I ask? Yu Qianqiu picked up his chopsticks and ate happily. With food in his mouth, he stammered, "I guess it has something to do with the skill I'm practicing. My master said that the skill I'm practicing is the most sacred skill between heaven and earth. It's just the soul transforming smoke. The most sacred skill between heaven and earth?" Nongzhu's face was full of envy. She carried the sword on her shoulder and said patiently, "Yu Qianqiu, what's the name of your skill? Can you show me your incantation?" "You can ask my master. I can't make the decision." Yu Qianqiu smoothly mentioned by Chongqun. Nongzhu was speechless. However, her eyes were fixed on the fine steel bracelet on Yu Qianqiu's left wrist. Yu Qianqiu threw the sword into his storage bag. His body flashed. Before he knew what was going on, he found that the bracelet on his wrist was gone. He immediately roared, "Nongzhu, what are you doing? Get back to me." Nongzhu turned a deaf ear to him. She took the bracelet and injected her divine sense into it to check it. Then she clicked her tongue and said, "You are so lucky. There are treasures everywhere. Oh my God, a storage bracelet used by an immortal. This was probably the only one in the world. Good stuff, good stuff. By the way, what about the things inside? Where did you hide it? Take it out for me to see." Yu Qianqiu smashed the chopsticks in his hand on the table and snorted. "Show you? If you snatch it away, who am I going to ask for it?" "What are you talking about? Am I that kind of person? Take it out and let me have a look. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I'm just short of immortals." Nongzhu winked at him. However, his eyes were darting around Yu Qianqiu's body, as if he was looking for a place to hide something. Recalling the scene of Yu Qianqiu taking out the sword from the storage bag, he dashed over without hesitation and grabbed the storage bag. However, after shaking it out for a long time, there were only a few spiritual stones. Nongzhu was stunned. "Don't tell me you've hidden a few more storage bags with you. I'm afraid that I'll meet someone like you who hides all the valuable things." Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand in disdain. Give me back the bracelet. Why are you so stingy? You've hidden a lot of treasures, but you don't need this. Give it to me to play with for a while. I'll give it back to you when the time comes. Nongzhu played with the bracelet fondly and put it on his wrist. He was quite satisfied with it. To be honest, he really liked it. Other than being an item from the immortal realm, it was really practical. Which cultivator wouldn't like such a large storage space? Give it back to me when the time comes. He didn't know how long he would have to wait. Yu Qianqiu looked at him coldly and said indifferently, I can give it to you, but you have to give me something in exchange. I heard from Ze that the purple bamboos in the South Sea purple bamboo forest can produce spiritual energy. I want half of them. What? Nongzhu suddenly realized and said, No, not even one. Humph. I knew that you love bamboo as much as your life. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, Now you know who's stingy. I'm giving you treasures from the immortal realm in exchange for your bamboos. I'm at a disadvantage, but you won't even give me one. Nongzhu smiled embarrassedly and touched the bracelet on his wrist. He suddenly sighed and said, It's not that I want it. I just want to find a unique treasure for Ze as a dowry. Yu Qianqiu looked at his lonely face and knew that he didn't seem to be lying. He opened his mouth and was stunned for a while. Then he asked curiously, As a dowry for Ze? Is Ze going to marry someone? Who is she going to marry? Which family does she belong to? How can she be liked by you, Mr. Nongzhu? Tell me and see if I know her or not. If I don't know her, at least let me know in advance so that I won't offend my own people. Bang! Nongzhu banged the table and shouted, It's none of your business who she marries. F***CK. You snatch my stuff and still turn against me. Yu Qianqiu was also angry. He banged the table and shouted even louder, It's none of my business? Give me back the bracelet. Why should my treasures be used as a dowry for your daughter? What kind of logic is this? Who cares about your treasures? Even if you give me 10,000 treasures, they can't compare to my Ze. Nongzhu's face was livid, and he threw the bracelet on his wrist. Yu Qianqiu caught it with one hand, and his arm became numb. He gritted his teeth and put the bracelet back on his wrist. He sneered and said, It's good that you don't care about it. It's not like I have too many treasures to spend. I don't believe that anyone will complain about having too many treasures. While they were quarreling, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du were chatting with Man, Hu, and others downstairs. They didn't know that the two people upstairs had turned against each other. After the quarrel, Nongzhu sat there in the box with a dull face and didn't say a word. I'm so angry, you old bastard. Yu Qianqiu picked up a new pair of chopsticks and ate to his heart's content. The only sound in the room was the sound of his chewing. Nongzhu didn't come to herself until Yu Qianqiu burped. She looked at Yu Qianqiu helplessly and said, Yu Qianqiu, tell me the truth. What do you think of the man in purple? F***CK. She's not marrying me. It's none of my business whether he's good or bad. Yu Qianqiu licked the grease on his mouth and put down the chopsticks. He looked at Nongzhu and shook his head. He thought, this old handsome guy has the syndrome of marrying off his daughter. I won't argue with you, a patient. He picked up the tea and poured it into his mouth. He rinsed his mouth and flushed the residue in his mouth into his stomach. He tilted his head and thought silently. Nongzhu looked at his rude and uncultured look, and she hated him a little. She imagined that she had been elegant in the cultivation world all her life. At the end of the day, she met such a guy. It was karma. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while. Suddenly, he stretched his head and said suspiciously, Is Ze really going to get married? Why didn't I hear anything about it before? Well, a grown girl can't be kept at home. I can't keep her for a lifetime. Nongzhu nodded slightly and then asked expressionlessly, You seem to care a lot about Ze. Why? What do you think about her getting married? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot with a look of what can I think? But he still said, A grown girl can't be kept at home. You're right. You finally figured it out. That's the reason. Seriously, who is she going to marry? Tell me about it first. You know, I often get into conflicts with others. If I meet your son-in-law, I'll hit him too hard and accidentally. Well, you know. But in his heart, he was thinking, damn it, he didn't know whose son Nongzhu liked. He must have a powerful background. Damn it, He could use Nongju to build a good relationship with him. Maybe he would be a good helper. Hey, no. Why did Nongju suddenly come to Baiwan country? Now she inexplicably said that Zi Yi was going to get married. Did Wen Lanfeng have a son or a grandson? Never heard of it. Well, it shouldn't be a grandson. If so, the seniority between Nongju and Wen Lanfeng would be reduced by 1 generation for nothing. If Nongju and Zi knew what he was thinking, they would probably torture him to death on the spot. Oh, Nongju raised her eyebrows and sneered. You're so cunning. Don't tell me that you've been thinking about Zi Yi for a long time. Now you want to find out who Zi Yi is going to marry from me, and then you can hurt her. Chapter 573. Yu Qianqiu revealed an expression of, "You don't understand me," and solemnly replied, "Don't look down on me just because I do things in a flashy manner. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm actually a very low-key person. Women belong to me. I am sincere to each of them. I don't need to show them off just to prove that I am a man. I only told you this because you asked me. Otherwise, I would have kept my mouth shut." Be starred. You're speaking in such a dignified way. Nongju said word by word with hatred. You're shameless. You mean me? Yu Qianqiu pointed at his own nose, a look of confusion on his face. He didn't know what kind of medicine this fellow had eaten to fall out with him just like that. He retorted angrily, no matter how shameless I am, I didn't do that kind of thing. He was not like some people who thought that they looked impressive and went around swindling people, fooling around with each person they played with. If you ask him to count how many women he has played with in his life, I'm afraid he can't even count himself. How could he be qualified to criticize others? What the hell? I've never seen such a shameless person before. Bah! Bang bang. Nongju turned the table upside down. The tableware such as bowls, chopsticks, and plates fell on the ground. She pointed at him and shouted, "Who are you talking about?" When Yu Qianqiu turned hostile, he was also someone who wouldn't be swayed by force or persuasion. He immediately sneered and said, "I'm talking about whoever did that kind of thing. Poor thing." In the Moon Sect, Qianhua Lonely Shadow faced Lung Hanyue. Missing you, but not seeing you. Women met, but didn't know each other. Heartbroken year after year. It's so miserable. I don't know who did it. I dare you to say it again. Nongju shouted angrily. It seemed that she was about to hit him. Hee hee. Mr. Nongju, you are famous in the world. You are very powerful. I can't afford to offend you, but I can hide from you. I won't say it. Yu Qianqiu put on an expression of trying to keep the peace. He glanced at the mess on the ground, shook his head and sighed. Hoeing the fields at noon, sweat dripping into the soil. Who would have thought that every single grain of food on the plate was so hard? Damn it, your father really knows how to talk. It's just a pity that this land is full of food. Nongju let out a muffled groan. She held her chest and staggered a step back. She bumped into the chair behind her and sat down. His face was pale as he panted heavily. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Yu Qianqiu without blinking. Today, he finally witnessed what it meant to be sharp-tongued. His head buzzed, and he felt the blood in his chest rising. He almost spat something out because he couldn't hold it in. His lips were tightly shut, and he couldn't speak even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He secretly smacked his tongue and reflected on himself. Oh my God! Back then, I made a nascent soul cultivator vomit blood in Ong Kwang Tsung. Am I going to make a soul formation cultivator vomit blood today? The higher the cultivation, the better the ability to piss people off. Wasn't a bit too much? After all, he was not an outsider, but he shouldn't have gone too far. He also understood that people who had reached such a high level of cultivation would have opened up all the blocked meridians long ago. It was a small matter for them to be injured. But once they were so angry that they vomited blood, it would be a big problem. They were even more terrible than ordinary people. If their qi and blood were in disorder, their meridians would be damaged. It was not much different from being possessed by the devil during cultivation. It would take a long time to recuperate if it was light. But if it was heavy, their cultivation would be destroyed. It was not a joke. Don't be angry. If you want to scold me, I'll let you scold me. I won't fight back when you hit me or scold me. Yu Qianqiu sincerely admitted his mistake. Then he asked weakly, "Are you all right?" And Nongzhu's hand that had just been put down pressed on his chest again. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. He quickly closed his eyes, put his hands in his dantian, and silently ran his qi to regulate his breath. How could he be angry like this? Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he covered his mouth immediately. He was afraid that he couldn't help but say something else. However, he didn't expect that Nongzhu, who was so thick-skinned, couldn't stand the provocation. He was so surprised that he didn't dare to speak easily. After all, he was not someone else. If something bad happened to him because of his anger, he couldn't explain it when he went back. After a long time, Nongzhu's flushed face gradually returned to normal. He slowly breathed out and opened his eyes. He stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing there obediently for a while. Suddenly, he showed an expression that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He sat there alone, shaking his head and giggling. He had never thought that someone could actually anger him to this extent. Good Lord, every word was like a knife, piercing the soft spot. It was really a deep attack. Even his cultivation at the middle stage of Huashan realm almost couldn't bear it. Who would believe it? His smile didn't matter, but it scared Yu Qianqiu. Was he so angry that he became stupid? That would be a big sin. Yu Qianqiu was a little scared and asked carefully, "Senior Nongzhu, are you okay?" He asked the question 3 times, but he was still giggling. He was completely panicked. He flashed over and grabbed Nongzhu's wrist to check his body. Bang! Nongzhu slapped his hand away, stood up, and scolded him fiercely. "What are you doing? You want me to die early, don't you? Let me tell you, it's impossible for me to die. Even if you die, I will still be alive and kicking. Damn, I'm so angry." Yes, I was wrong. Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, patted his chest, and said, "Damn, I was scared to death." When he was too angry, he became much calmer and didn't think so impulsively. Nongzhu regained his calmness. Looking at him with a lingering fear, a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes, and then he became indifferent again. He said, "It's rare. You didn't want me to die early." "What are you talking about? I'm so honest. I burn incense and pray for you whenever I have the time, and I wish for nothing more than for you to live a long and healthy life." Yu Qianqiu said these kind words in a heartwarming manner. He was truly afraid that this paper-thin guy would do something bad again. Now, he found that Nongzhu's mental age was really different from his actual age. Wasn't he being childish? "Stop." Nongzhu was angry and funny at the same time. She said, "You are so busy, and you still have time to burn incense and pray for me? What were you doing just now?" Yu Qianqiu wanted to defend himself, but he was worried that Nongzhu would be irritated again. So he swallowed his words and corrected himself. He said, Yes. I deeply recognize my mistake, and I will change. I'm sure you will be satisfied." "Is it really karma?" This is fate." Nongzhu shook her head helplessly. Glancing at the mess on the ground, she relaxed and stared at Yu Qianqiu. She sighed and said, "Don't talk nonsense anymore. I have something to tell you. You can tell Z when you find the right opportunity. I believe you can seize this opportunity." Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled face and asked, "What is it that you can't tell Z directly? Why do you want to tell her? Is it about the relationship between you two, father and daughter?" Nongzhu shook her head sadly and said, "It doesn't matter whether Z recognizes me as her father or not, because I didn't really fulfill my responsibility as a father. I'm really ashamed of her. You can tell her that her father's name is Xiaoyao, and I, Nongzhu, am just her teacher. What I want you to tell her is the past of her father, Xiaoyao, and her mother, Qianhua Fairy. She has the right to know this. I can't hide it from her forever." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was interesting to gossip about a handsome man and a beautiful woman. However, seeing Nongzhu's unprecedentedly lonely expression, he had to restrain himself so as not to irritate her again. He nodded and said, "I will try my best to live up to your trust." It was a beautiful day. We met in the green mountains and clear waters, and we fell in love at first sight. Everything seemed so beautiful, and I really fell in love with her. However, such a beautiful beginning couldn't end well, which was beyond my expectation. Nongju's handsome face was full of confusion about the past. He traveled across time and space and slowly told the story of the past that had been covered in dust. Some things are destined, and you can't avoid it even if you want to. It turned out that Nongju really fell in love with Xianghua Fairy at first sight. He didn't just play with her like other women, but really wanted to be with her forever. Therefore, he planted the crystallization of their love in Xianghua Fairy's body. Otherwise, with his cultivation, how could Xianghua Fairy get pregnant so easily? In fact, from the beginning, Nongju knew that Xianghua Fairy was a cultivator and thought she was an individual cultivator. However, with the latter's cultivation, she couldn't tell that Nongju was also a cultivator. Since Xianghua Fairy didn't mention her identity as a cultivator, Nongju didn't tell her either. At that time, Nongju was blinded by blind love. He only hoped that they could be equal and didn't want to compete with each other. Therefore, he didn't tell her that he was a master in the Huashan realm. He didn't want to scare Xianghua Fairy more or less. After going through the long life of mortals, he was used to seeing too much deception and was somewhat tired of it. He just wanted the love between them to be purer and less distracting. He thought that maybe Xianghua Fairy also thought the same, so she didn't tell him that she was a cultivator. He thought that with their relationship, it would be a great surprise when they told each other the truth, because the love between the two of them would not be limited by their lifespans and be too short. Just think about it. How could they not be pleasantly surprised? Nongju had already thought about it. Once they knew each other's cultivator identity, he would take Xianghua Fairy back to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest and live a carefree life. After Zi Yi was born, Nongju was overjoyed. But at this time, Xianghua Fairy suddenly told Nongju that she was a cultivator. She was a disciple of the Moon Clan. Nongju didn't care about her identity. With her cultivation, she could take away a disciple from the Moon Clan, and no one would dare to stop her. But what Xianghua Fairy wanted to say was that apart from being a disciple of the Moon Clan, she was also the successor of the next leader of the Moon Clan. Chapter 574. What surprised Nongju even more was that the Moon Clan had a secret that they didn't tell outsiders. All disciples of the Moon Clan could have children outside, but if their daughters were talented enough to cultivate, they had to bring them back to the Moon Clan and cultivate under the Moon Clan. If it was a son, the Moon Clan wouldn't accept him. It was better to let the man carry on the family line, because the Moon Clan never accepted male disciples. Xianghua Fairy felt guilty and told Nongju that she was going to bring her daughter back to the Moon Clan to cultivate. She asked Nongju to find another wife. As for her, she was going to continue the Moon Clan sooner or later. She couldn't spend the rest of her life with an ordinary person like him. One could imagine how angry Nongju was at that time. He had lived a carefree life among the flowers for half of his life, and it was not easy for him to settle down and give his heart to her. He did not expect this to be the result. She felt like she was cheated. Plus, with her cultivation and status in the cultivation world, how could she allow her daughter to cultivate in a small Moon Clan? That was the biggest joke in the world. With her cultivation of the soul formation state, she couldn't teach her daughter better than a small Moon Clan. Plus, Nongju couldn't let her daughter follow in the footsteps of her mother. Nongju didn't care about the leader of the Moon Clan. Nongju wanted to kill her way to the Moon Clan and raze the entire Moon Clan to the ground. But thinking about it, she felt that it would be too easy for Xianghua Fairy. She lied to her so badly. If a man who didn't fall in love easily found out that he was cheated after falling in love, the consequences would be terrible. Plus, he was a very powerful and capable man. Nongju was determined to let Xianghua Fairy taste the feeling of being cheated. She would regret it for the rest of her life. Xianghua Fairy knew that Nongju wouldn't be happy if she did that. However, her daughter was in her hands, and Nongju couldn't take her away. She kept persuading Nongju, saying that it was for her daughter's good and that she didn't want her daughter to be like him, an ordinary person for the rest of her life. Nongju only sneered at that time, but she didn't expect that Nongju was a legendary cultivator of the soul formation state. It would be easy for her to take her daughter away from her. Therefore, on a sunset, the viburnum flower fairy had just gone out to grab something and turn around. When he came in again, he found that his daughter, who had just been placed on the bed, was gone. She immediately guessed that it was bamboo, so she looked around. However, it was impossible for her to find Nongju with her cultivation. Since then, the Jade Flower Fairy had never seen the man called Xiaoyao again. Her infant daughter also disappeared with him. Nongju naturally brought her daughter back to the purple bamboo forest and taught her carefully. From then on, the Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest had a female disciple called for the sake of her daughter. Nongju completely gave up the habit of flirting. Of course, Jasper Flower Fairy also played a part in it. She had broken his heart completely, and he had learned from her painful experience that he would never touch another woman again. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to say. So there was such a hidden story. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. He swallowed his saliva, scratched his stiff chin, and looked at the absent-minded Nongju, speechless. At that time, he thought that Nongju, the playboy, abandoned her and played around. As a result, she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby. Then she ran away because she was unwilling to take responsibility. He never thought that the most handsome man in the world was dumped by his sister. Unbelievable. Thinking back, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. No wonder Nongju asked him to find a chance to tell Ziyi about it. Thinking about Ziyi's strange life, how could Nongju tell her? Even if he told Yi, he would have to find a time when Ziyi could accept it. Damn it! Would Ziyi take things too hard and say that I'm talking nonsense and fight with me? What? No way. In this case, it would be more appropriate to let Ziyi's future husband tell her. Why did she come to me? She was trying to hurt me. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and his face twitched. Ahem. That. Senior Nongju, I think. Nongju slowly turned around and said, What do you think? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled bitterly. I think that this kind of words. I think Ziyi's closest person should tell her. Think about it. No one else can find a good chance for Ziyi to accept. Only the person closest to her can find a chance. Don't you think so? For example, the man Ziyi is going to marry, right? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to tell her. To be honest, I'm a little scared. Let's see then. Just keep this in mind for now. By the way, Nongju sneered and said, the man Ziyi is going to marry also has 3 or 4 women. I'm a little worried. I'm afraid Ziyi will be wronged in the future. What do you think I should do? Damn it. Why don't you just let Ziyi marry me? Don't let the goodies flow to others. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. But thinking about it, maybe in Nongju's eyes, his future son-in-law was one of his own, and he, Yu Qianqiu, was an outsider. Thinking about it, he was a little angry. He immediately patted his chest and said, That's easy. As long as you say it, I'll find a way to do it for you. It's just 3 or 4 women. If you want to kill me, just say it. I promise you'll do it without anyone knowing. Your son-in-law will never suspect you. She wanted him to stay by Ziyi's side and live an honest life. If he dares to marry me in the future, as long as I know it, I promise I'll make Ziyi unique. If he keeps doing it, I don't mind making him a eunuch. The corner of Nongju's mouth twitched. She smacked her lips and said, I believe you. You're the best at doing this kind of thing. It won't be a problem for you. Her words made Yu Qianqiu a little unhappy. What did she mean by, I'm the best at doing this kind of thing? He curled his lips and said, Senior Nongju, I never do this kind of thing. Only when you say it, I'll do my best. This is called keeping promises and valuing credibility. Forget it. It's fine as long as you have the heart. Nongju waved her hand and asked, If I want to marry my daughter to him, should he give me a betrothal gift first? How much do you think I should accept to marry my daughter to him? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, You're kidding. Mr. Nongju is famous in the cultivation world. Your daughter is even more precious than him. How can the betrothal gift not be enough? By the way, is your future son-in-law rich? Nongju thought for a while and said slowly, Rich. There are many treasures. Any one of them is a rare treasure. But that guy is a miser. I'm afraid it's a little difficult for him to take out a big gift. Any one of them is a rare treasure? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He couldn't stop clicking his tongue in his heart. I knew it. The son-in-law that Nongzhu likes must be from a powerful family. I don't know who he is. If I want to build a relationship with him in the future, even if he's a miser, I'll pluck some of his feathers. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu said indignantly. The richer a man is, the more stingy he is. He doesn't even want to give a big gift to his wife. It's reasonable for a poor man like me. Why won't he give a big gift, even if he has money? How can you swallow this? Tell me who the bastard is. I'll avenge you sooner or later. He had already begun to plan in his heart. After torturing the World Chamber of Commerce, his next stop would be Nongzhu's rich son-in-law. Speaking of him, I'm full of anger. I don't want to talk about him. By the way, what about you? Nongzhu asked. Oh, what about me? Yu Qianqiu didn't know why he asked this. Nongzhu said with a fake smile, I'm marrying my daughter. Aren't you going to give her a gift? F***ck. You don't have the ability to get your son-in-law's betrothal gift. Why do you want to give a gift? Is there anyone who asks for a gift from a guest before they even get married? I'm so easy to bully. Yu Qianqiu curled his lips and said with a smile, that one came in a hurry. He didn't bring anything good with him. How about this? On the day of Ziyi's marriage, I'll definitely bring a gift to congratulate her. No, you have to receive the gift before you get married. Nongzhu said seriously. Receive a gift in advance? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said suspiciously, how come I didn't know there was such a rule in the cultivation world? This is the rule of my southern sea purple bamboo forest. Nongzhu's face stiffened. Then he thought of a suitable reason and explained, furthermore, you're very busy. When the time comes, you won't even know where I'm going to inform you. While I'm here, it's good to receive the gift in advance. Don't tell me that you're so stingy that you won't even give a gift when Ziyi gets married. Hee, what are you saying? Am I that stingy? I'm just thinking about what I should give her. Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. However, after thinking about the close relationship between him and Ziyi, it would be a little inappropriate to give an ordinary gift. Subconsciously, he touched the storage bag on his waist and found that it was gone. Only then did he remember that it was taken away by Nongzhu and was lying on the ground. Nongzhu had already checked it. If he took something out from it, it would be a little inappropriate. So he smiled at Nongzhu and put one hand into the clothes on his chest. He pulled out another storage bag from under his armpit. Nongzhu's eyes twitched. She thought to herself, there's another storage bag on her body. Yu Qianqiu reached into his storage pouch and pulled out a sword with simple and unadorned patterns. He held it in his hand and examined it. But then, his regretful expression turned resolute. He said straightforwardly, this sword is the same style as the one I gave to my master. They're both treasures of that immortal. Since Ziyi is getting married, I have nothing to say. I'll congratulate her with a generous gift. Senior Nongzhu, you won't say that I'm stingy, will you? As he said this, he held the sword with both hands and handed it over. I sincerely wish Ziyi a happy life. Nongzhu's eyes lit up. She took it and touched it. As expected, it was not inferior to the one she gave to Bai Changchun. She couldn't help but praise, good sword. Then, she nodded with satisfaction and said, you still have a conscience. Chapter 575. Hee. The gift is too small. As long as you're satisfied. Yu Qianqiu laughed happily. He didn't realize that he had sold himself. Nongzhu sheathed her sword and inexplicably felt relieved. It was as if the courage that had been on her shoulders had finally been removed. She looked at Yu Qianqiu again and thought of the day when Ziyi bullied him on Shuntian Island. She suddenly felt refreshed. Can't catch you? Someone can. You will suffer in the future. Yu Qianqiu suddenly found a strange smile on Nongzhu's lips. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became alert. Is she using Ziyi's marriage as an excuse to cheat me of my treasure? That's too shameless. So he asked suspiciously, what are you laughing at? Are you using Z to cheat me of my treasure? Cheat your head. Well, I cheat you with Zi's life. Nongju scolded. She felt angry and funny looking at this guy. No matter how cunning he would still have a blind spot when thinking about problems. This guy's EQ was extremely low. As for his low EQ, Yu Chincho had actually discovered it himself. Since his previous life, he had been living in deception and killing. He didn't have a mood to play romantic and delicate love. Saving his life was the first priority. Although he had met many women and it was common for him to play around with them, he could tell whether a woman was good or bad at a glance. However, he had no experience in serious love. Later, he made a name for himself and had a position in Jianghu. In addition, the women he met at that time were quite realistic. Therefore, for him, no matter how beautiful a woman was, she was still an animal on the bed. Talking about love with them? He was either talking nonsense or courting death. Because he had no experience in this aspect, and this life was the fate of his previous life, he was still fighting and killing. Therefore, the women he found in this life were as simple and kind as possible. Because he felt that it was too tiring to play mind games with his woman, and he didn't have the energy to deal with it. He had chosen Furong, Wu Lixue, Chu Ping'er, and Bai Suzhen, who had been silently sacrificing herself for him. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had thought it through. Among the 3 women who had a romantic relationship, only Chu Ping'er had a complicated life experience. However, it was a dream that led him to join the cultivation world, and he instinctively wanted to protect this dream. As for Furong and Wu Lixue, they were 2 simple and pure women. So what if he said they were stupid? In short, he liked them very much. Wasn't Bai Suzhen the same? She was a woman who only knew how to treat him well. It was also because of these women who did not hold him back that he could do whatever he wanted in the cultivation world without any worries. In fact, the reason why he didn't bring the women together was because he was worried that they would clash and cause trouble for him, and he didn't have time to deal with them. After all, women were also human beings. Who would be willing to share the same man with others? In such a contradictory situation, he could only take one step at a time. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being a bit fickle. Every time he thought about it, he would tell himself that it didn't matter if he had a low EQ. He would try his best to treat them well. Definitely. Of course, a low EQ didn't mean that he was an idiot. For a woman like the enchantress who dared to love and hate openly, how could he not know her feelings? However, some things were difficult for him to accept. It was really difficult, and it was better for him to avoid it. I was just saying. I didn't mean anything else. Don't be angry. Hearing Nongju's scolding, he agreed with a silly smile. It was true. Nongju would not cheat others with Zi's life. Otherwise, she would not be Nongju. It seemed that Zi was really going to get married. What a pity. Although she was sometimes unruly, she was still a simple girl. But she was going to be someone else's woman. Damn it. I'm going back to Shuntian Island in a few days. Do you have any words for me to take back? Nongju looked at him with an evil smile. Aren't you very capable? When you become my son-in-law, I will torture you. Let's see if you still have any temper then. Now he had thought it through. Since his daughter liked him, could he really be cruel and stop her by force? The answer was definitely no. Taking 10,000 steps back and thinking about it, this guy wasn't completely useless. Although he was a little bad, in this sinister cultivation world, he had the ability to protect himself. This was not necessarily a bad thing for Zi, who was inexperienced in the world. Moreover, Lao Bai had an extraordinary vision. He thought so highly of him and hinted many times that he could let Zi be with him without worry. There must be a reason. Then let nature take its course. In fact, what moved Nongju the most was Yu Chincho's care for Furong. He had always wanted to find a man for his daughter. He was the type who could take good care of his daughter. But who told him to act too late? And another woman had already beat him to it. But who could see that this bad guy had such a disgusting side? Could he blame himself for making a mistake? Yu Chincho scratched his head embarrassedly. He smiled and said that, Senior, please help me tell Furong to stay in Shuntian Island. I'm fine outside. And my master, please send my regards to him. Huh. That's all. Nongju reminded. Don't you have any words for Ze? She sounded a little unhappy. Yes, yes, yes. Yu Chincho quickly nodded and said, help me congratulate Ze. On the day she gets married, I will definitely prepare a big gift for her. That's more like it. Nongju suddenly sighed. Remember to treat Ze well in the future. I don't need you to remind me. Based on our relationship, I will definitely treat her well. Yu Chincho patted his chest and promised, don't worry. Ze's business is my business. Tell her, no matter who she marries, if she encounters any trouble in the future, just let me know. I don't dare to promise anything else, but murder and arson. No. I mean, I won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Idiot. Nongju scolded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She pointed at him and said, I heard that Yu Chincho, are very talented. I really wonder if you plagiarized those things from somewhere. They don't match up at all. Yu Chincho didn't care. They were plagiarized things anyway. Nongju asked again, tell me honestly. You became Nyo Yud and created that restriction-breaking pill. What are you trying to do? Hey, I have a lot of women and expenses. If I don't make some money, how can I support my family? Yu Chincho shook his head helplessly. Nongju's mouth twitched. Listening to him, it seemed that her daughter would not be short of money in the future. This was a good thing. She paused and said, you have your eyes on the world commerce. Isn't it said that the world commerce is the richest? Yu Chincho said weakly. Be careful. In Baikong's money isn't that easy to get. Don't let your women become widows before you can get your money. Nongju's words were sarcastic, but there was a rare sense of concern. The difference in treatment between a family and a non-family was huge. Yu Chincho laughed and said, whether or not he can get the money is another matter. But if he wants to kill me, I'm afraid that In Baikong is still lacking. Nongju glanced at him. She still had some confidence in his ability to escape. It was definitely not a coincidence that this guy could escape from death time and time again. He must have something to rely on. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't dare to touch In Baikong. How audacious! Do as you see fit. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Nongju was about to turn around when she heard Yu Chincho ask, Senior Nongju, let me ask you something. Do you know who the one-armed guy in the Ghost Manor is? Also, I saw a mysterious masked woman in the Ghost Manor. The one-armed old man was very respectful to her. Nongju asked casually, you met both of them in the Ghost Manor? Yes. Yu Chincho nodded and said, I feel that the one-armed old man is a spirit-severing master. But he was very respectful to the masked woman. Could it be that she is also a spirit-severing master? Yes, both of them are spirit-severing masters. Moreover, both of them are people with great backgrounds. Speaking of which, they are related to your master. Nongju explained, the one-armed old man is called Li Duxing. Like his name, he was a loner in the cultivation world and never had any contact with anyone. That woman should be Lu Yanqing from the Lingfang Valley. The most beautiful woman in the world, Lu Yanqing. Yu Chincho showed a trace of regret. It was a pity that he didn't see her face at that time. Then, he was slightly taken aback. He had dragged third brother Xin into the picture. Could it be that he had exposed himself? But he didn't think it was possible. Even if she asked third Xin, how could he know who Nyo Yud was? At most, he would think that he was talking nonsense to confuse people. But he didn't know that third Xin had asked his master about the origin of this method after he saw the horror of his absorbing stars technique. Lu Yanqing didn't know either. But when she saw Nyo Yud fight in the Ghost Manor, she guessed that he was Yu Chincho. Nongju saw that he was tempted by her beauty and snorted. What? Are you interested in Lu Yanqing? No. I just want to see what the most beautiful woman in the world looks like. Don't get the wrong idea. Yu Chincho waved his hands awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. Lu Yanqing, I know you had a conflict with my master. What's the relationship between Li Duxing and my master? 500 years ago, Li Duxing was also a proud man with extraordinary aptitude. At that time, he had just broken through from the middle stage of spirit severing to the last stage of spirit severing. But he didn't know how proud he was. Instead, he went to challenge your master directly, bypassing the other 9 of the top 10 masters. Don't you know what kind of person your master is? As a result, he was seriously injured by your master on the spot. He was lucky that I happened to be playing in Shantian Island. So, he begged your master to let him go. Nongju shook her head slightly and sighed with emotion. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a bit of boredom and thought, damn it, my master is a villain, but you're a good guy. You're like Song Jiang in time. No wonder he is so popular in the cultivation world. Everyone owes him a favor. Nongju continued. In fact, I have never dealt with Li Duxing. I only heard of his name. We don't know each other. He was very arrogant when he broke into the demon ghost realm and was very rude to me. To be honest, I didn't want to save him at that time. Later, I saw that he was beaten so badly by your master that he almost didn't look like a human and lost one of his arms. Finally, I couldn't bear to see him like that, so I saved him. But when I saved him, I found that he was unconscious. There were more than 80 holes in his body because of your master's finger. He was so miserable. He is completely relying on his profound cultivation to hang on to his last breath. Based on my ability, there is no way I can save him. I had to send him to Lu Yanxing in Lingfang Valley. Chapter 576. Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. He's already injured like that, but Lu Yanxing still saved him? Nongju shook her head and said, I don't know. I didn't know that Li Duxing was still alive until I heard that he appeared in Ghost Village. He should have been saved by Lu Yanxing. With an injury like that, I reckon that other than Lu Yanxing's wonderful hands, no one else would be able to save him. But I heard that his cultivation dropped from the last stage of Huashan Realm to the early stage of Huashan Realm. I don't know if his cultivation has improved after all these years. Tut tut. In this case, that one-armed old fart owes you a life-saving grace. Yu Qianqiu said with a chuckle. He was still in a coma and didn't know that I saved him. What's more, I didn't contact him and I don't want him to owe me anything. When I handed him over to Lu Yanxing, I told Lu Yanxing not to tell him that I saved him. I think Li Duxing doesn't know about it. Nongju said lightly. Oh. Yu Qianqiu made a long oh sound, which seemed to say, I didn't know that you were so noble and unquestionable. You did a good deed without leaving your name. Nongju ignored his sarcastic tone and reminded him. So many years have passed. I don't know what Li Duxing thinks about what happened that year. Be careful when you meet him in the future. Don't let him know that you are Bai's disciple. If he still holds a grudge against you, I'm afraid he will hurt you. I see. Yu Qianqiu nodded. Suddenly, he frowned and seemed to think of something. He asked seriously, What's the relationship between you and Wenlanfeng? Hearing this, Nongju looked at him seriously and warned, Don't you dare have any bad ideas about Wenlanfeng. This time, he didn't hesitate to fall out with the 6 masters and use them to show his power. It's all because he promised me and your master that he would support you in Shantian Island. Don't be so ungrateful. Needless to say, I'm not a person who returns kindness with ingratitude. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said in a low voice, But he lost a master. I don't know if he will have other thoughts. Other than being infatuated with Lu Yanxing, he is an upright person, and his relationship with me is not bad. Since you promised me to take care of you, you won't play tricks behind my back. You're trustworthy. Nongju asked suspiciously, What are you trying to say? It's like this. Yu Qianqiu asked, When you came up just now, did you see the young man beside Manhu? You mean the boy at the early stage of nature's test? Nongju asked. That's right. That person is the traitor of the Chinese cultivation world, Yin Zhuixing, one of the Yin father and son who retreated to the Everlasting Island. I didn't expect him to come here. It's really suspicious. Yu Qianqiu said with a frown. Oh, so is him. Nongju joked. I heard that you and he were sworn enemies in the Chinese cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu ignored his sarcasm. A fierce light flashed in his eyes. He squinted slightly, stared at Nongju, and said slowly, Help me kill him. You want me to kill Yin Zhuixing? Nongju stared at him up and down in surprise for a while, and then said with a smile, No. Don't you claim to be the best master below the Huashan realm? You've killed several masters at the late stage of nature's test. Yin Juexing is just at the early stage of nature's test. It's easy for you to kill him. What's more, I heard that Yin Juexing was defeated by you when he was in the Chinese cultivation world. He should be no match for you. Why do you want me to help you kill him? It should be a kind of intuition. I don't know why, but I always feel that he will be a great disaster if he stays, and we must eradicate him as soon as possible. By the way, I remember something. Yu Qianqiu asked, "Do you remember that Z and I once held a sword-drawing contest in the Chinese cultivation world?" I've heard a little about it. Nongzhu nodded slightly and carefully observed the expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. She found that his expression was very serious when he talked about Yin Juexing. This made him take it seriously. He thought to himself that this guy was not afraid of anything and even dared to kill masters of the Huashan realm, but he was afraid of a cultivator at the early stage of nature's test. It was really puzzling. You also know that the two swords were condensed by the ghost fire of the netherworld. During this sword-drawing contest, one of man whose junior brothers was killed by the black fire. But do you know how evil Yin Juexing is? Yu Qianqiu still had some lingering fear when he thought of the scene at that time. Yin Juexing's extremely cold eyes, after a pause, he continued, "That guy is not afraid of the black fire. And he even inhaled the evil spirit released by the black fire as oxygen. And that pair of eyes, oh my God, are those still human eyes? Damn, they are so evil." Z also saw it at that time. You can ask her if you don't believe me. There is such a thing. Nongzhu was also shocked. Others did not know the power of the black fire, but she had personally entered the 9th Netherworld cave and the Sea of Netherworld. Even though she was at the middle stage of Huashan realm, she did not dare to stay in front of the Sea of Netherworld for too long. She naturally knew how powerful the black spirit released by the black fire was, especially the black wind blade condensed by the black spirit, which was one of the biggest obstacles to the 9th Netherworld cave. But Yin Juexing was only at the early stage of nature's test. He was not afraid of the ghost fire of the netherworld, and he could even absorb the black spirit. Even Bai Changchun was afraid of it, but he was not afraid of it. It would be strange if Nongzhu was not shocked. Yu Qianqiu snorted fiercely. "I don't care how evil he is. It is better to eliminate the root of the problem than to nip it in the bud. With my cultivation, I can't find a chance to do it now, otherwise I would have done it long ago. So, please help me get rid of him as soon as possible." A ruthless character was revealed without a doubt. Nongzhu was stunned by his look. She thought, old Bai is cruel and merciless, but this guy is not only cruel and merciless, but also fierce and unscrupulous. Where did he learn all these? I can't help you with this. Nongzhu shook her head slowly and said, "Yin Juexing is one of the main figures in the war against the Huaxia cultivation world with the support of various countries. I promised them that I would not interfere in the war between them and the Huaxia cultivation world. Once I help you kill Yin Juexing, I will break the promise I made." Yu Qianqiu stamped his feet in exasperation and said, "Hey, why are you so pedantic? I didn't ask you to do it openly. You could have killed him secretly. With your cultivation, killing him would be a piece of cake. If you did it secretly, no one would know it was you. Go to hell as far as you can." Nongzhu was a little embarrassed and said, "Do you think I am like you? I do things by hook or by crook. I will definitely keep my promise to others. This is my bottom line as a person." Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. Then he bowed and tried to persuade her with good intentions. "Let's not talk about the hatred between me and him. He will seek revenge on me sooner or later. But I really have a very strong feeling that you may not believe it if I say it. When I saw him in the saber drawing contest, I had a very strong premonition that this guy will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. Just think of it as getting rid of the scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. He had a premonition that Yin Juexing would become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world, and Yin Juexing had a premonition that he would meet him in by one country. I don't know whether these two guys are telling the truth or not. Anyway, it is a little mysterious." Nongzhu snorted and smiled. "This guy is fooling me again. He obviously wants to use me to get rid of the dissidents, but he uses a premonition as an excuse. If he wants to fool me, he should find a better reason. I think you will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. No, you are already a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. Wherever you go, there will be chaos and no peace. Even if what you said is true, I will not break my bottom line. Nongzhu shook her head, unmoved. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help swearing. But he was still not reconciled. He rolled his eyes and said, Wait, since you have a good relationship with Wen Feng, there is something I have to remind you. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Nongzhu said impatiently. Did you notice when you passed by just now? Don't you find it strange that Yin Juixing is actually hanging out with that hipster girl? Yu Qianqiu reminded him with good intentions. Nongzhu looked at him vigilantly, but after thinking for a while, she also felt something was wrong. Although Hipster was a member of the royal family, she was a mortal and had nothing to do with cultivators. At most, she knew a little martial arts. But Yin Juixing, Manhu, and the other four masters at the end of the nature's test were together with her. Could they be friends? Seeing that he was thinking, Yu Qianqiu did not forget to add fuel to the fire. You may not know Yin Juixing, but he and I are enemies. I know him very well. As the saying goes, the person who knows you best is your enemy. We have a deep understanding of each other. Seeing that Nongzhu was listening carefully, he continued, Yin Juixing is extremely vicious. When he was still in the 100 Flowers Valley of Huaxia, he controlled a group of people with poison. The most terrifying thing was that he had somehow found a long-lost, primordial soul stripping technique and had been secretly controlling the cultivators of the cultivation world for his own use. Later, he used those people to burn, kill, and loot. Unfortunately, I ran into him, and it was because I exposed him that we became enemies. If you don't believe me, you can ask around in the Huaxia cultivation world. Then you will know whether what I said is true or not. Are you saying that he is plotting against the hipster girls? Nongzhu asked casually while thinking. Hipster is nothing. So what if he is a member of the royal family? Even if you give that girl to him, I'm afraid he will be too lazy to take her with him. She is a burden. He even brought 4 masters at the end of the nature's test to go shopping with that girl. What a ghost. Do you believe that he is so kind? Yu Qianqiu sneered and then said very seriously, I suspect that guy has designs on the Wen family. Otherwise, he will not be interested in a hipster. Since you have a good relationship with Wen Feng, you should let him be on his guard. You don't want me to find Wen Feng and ask him to kill Yin Juixing, do you? Nongzhu suddenly came to her senses. She realized that this guy had already planned to kill Yin Juixing when he mentioned Wen Feng, but he encouraged her to do it. Seeing that she did not agree, he showed his true colors. It was really one trap after another. Chapter 577. At this point, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to hide it anymore. It was meaningless. He said, let's not beat around the bush. Since you don't want to do it, let Wen Feng do it. It's for the good of the Wen family. Impossible. Wen Feng can't kill an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator for no reason. He's not like Yin Baikong. If he were that kind of person, I wouldn't be friends with him. Nongzhu saw that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to give up, so she waved her hand and said, all right, don't try to persuade me anymore. You figure it out yourself. He's just an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. It's not worth it for a soul formation cultivator to do it. Don't you know some early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators? You'd better target them. Although I haven't seen Yin Juixing fight, I'm afraid even an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator is no match for him. Yu Qianqiu asked, do you believe me? It doesn't matter if I believe you or not. You figure out yourself. I'll go back and tell Wen Feng about the hipster. Nongzhu lifted her hand and removed the soundproof barrier. She opened the door and walked out slowly with her hands behind her back. Pedantic. I'll do it myself. Yu Qianqiu muttered and followed behind Nongzhu. When the door opened, everyone's eyes were fixed on the upstairs. They saw 2 people walk out one after another and walk down the stairs. The most eye-catching one was Niu Yud, who walked behind them. He was not an ordinary person. How many people dared to be as arrogant as him in the cultivation world? Even Yin Juexing's gaze towards him was filled with admiration. The hipster was afraid. This person was comparable to Mr. Nongzhu. As for the shopkeepers and workers in the shop, they were trembling with fear. Imagine what kind of person would dare to look down on the princess. Mr. Nongzhu, Senior Niu. A group of people saluted. The two of them nodded slightly in acknowledgement, both of them looking like experts. Nongzhu took the opportunity to take a serious look at Yin Juexing and then glanced at Hipster. Without saying anything, she walked out of the store and said to Wen Chongzheng, who was bowing at the door, "Let these people go back. Let's go." Wen Chongzheng hurriedly shouted at the leaders of the soldiers outside, and then chased after Nongzhu eagerly. As for the soldiers, they had no choice but to withdraw. Yu Qianqiu glanced at everyone expressionlessly. His eyes paused on Yin Juexing as he let out a sound of surprise. Yin Juexing and Man Hu exchanged glances with each other. They did not know what Niu Yud had seen. Yulan smiled and said, "Senior Niu, is there something wrong? What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu asked Yin Juexing. With a faint smile, Yin Juexing bowed politely and said, "I'm Yin Juexing. What can I do for you, Senior?" Yu Qianqiu looked at Hipster and the shopkeepers in the shop and said, "Yulan Du, ask the irrelevant people to leave." Everyone understood the meaning behind his words. Some topics related to cultivators were naturally inconvenient for mortals to know. Yulan Du took the order and immediately asked the shopkeeper and the waiters to leave. The shopkeeper and the waiters did not dare to object, so they all left obediently. Under Yulan Du's instructions, the waiters even carried the 4 unconscious guards out. Only when Hipster was invited, she looked at Yin Juexing reluctantly, as if asking for his opinion. Yin Juexing smiled and nodded to her. Hipster then pouted and went out. Yulan Du was very meticulous. He even released his divine sense to check every corner of the restaurant. After making sure there was no one, he cupped his hands and said, "Senior, it's done." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to indicate that he understood. He stared at Yin Juexing and sized him up. Sometimes he shook his head, and sometimes he sighed. The group of people were baffled by the commotion. After a while, Senior Niu asked, "You are Yin Juexing, right?" "Yes." Yin Juexing looked calm on the surface, but he was pondering in his heart. "Strange. I've seen countless people, but I've never seen someone like you." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and asked, "Do you cultivate some kind of strange cultivation method?" "Not bad." Man Hu and the others were shocked. They did not expect Niu Yud to be so powerful. He could actually see that Yin Juexing cultivated a special cultivation method. He was indeed an expert who dared to attack the forces of various countries. Even their master, Bing Qingzi, could not be compared to him. He was too powerful. Yin Juexing's calm eyes were also moved. The few of them were not inexperienced people, so they quickly concealed it. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du could see that something was wrong with such an obvious reaction. The two of them exchanged glances. "Senior, you're overpraising me. The cultivation method that Junior cultivates is not special. It is a cultivation method passed down by the 10,000 demons in the Chinese cultivation world." Yin Juexing explained. "Passed down my ass. Isn't Xiao Weiyuan a disciple of the 10,000 demons? Isn't he better than you in the sword-drawing competition?" Yu Qianqiu also saw some clues from their brief shock. He knew that he had guessed correctly. He glanced at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du from the corner of his eyes. He stared at Yin Juexing and shook his head. "Brat, you might be able to hide it from others, but you can't hide it from my eyes. Although I don't know what cultivation method you are cultivating, if the 10,000 demons had such a cultivation method, I'm afraid that the entire cultivation world would have already surrendered to the 10,000 demons. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world would all have to step aside." These words were too frightening to hear. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du stared at Yin Juexing with eagle-like eyes. What a joke. This brat actually possessed a peerless cultivation method that even the top 10 experts of the cultivation world would have to step aside. How could that be? Didn't Niu Yud say that this was a cultivation method that could make the entire cultivation world surrender? Man Hu and the others were shocked again. This Niu Yud was too powerful. Everything he said was true. The demonic book was indeed a heaven-defying cultivation method. They felt that they shouldn't have stayed in Lan City this time. They shouldn't have met Nyo Yud. This time, they were in big trouble. Once this news spread, the consequences could be imagined. The four of them were tense on the inside, but relaxed on the outside. Their eyes were faintly staring at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du if this terrifying Nyo Yud was not here. The four of them would have killed them on the spot. They would never allow the two of them to spread the secret. Senior, your joke is too big. If this spreads, I won't be able to bear it, Yan Zhuixing said with a smile on his face. In his heart, he wished that he could kill this person. But for now, he wouldn't dare even if he had 10 guts. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. At least until now, he had never seen such a powerful person like Nyo Yud. When he met Wen Lanfeng in the One Family's sacred land, even when Lanfeng couldn't see through it. Yet he could. His cultivation could be imagined. No wonder he had the guts to mess around in the cultivation world. Without some ability, who would dare? Don't be nervous. I'm just saying casually. As for whether it's true or not, you and I both know it. There's no need to fight over it. Yu Qianshou shrugged indifferently and said, whether you make the entire cultivation world submit or not has nothing to do with me. Anyway, I'm alone. I won't fight for fame or profit with anyone. Haha, I'll just watch the show. Senior really likes to joke. Man who stepped forward and cupped his hands. We still have something to do. Farewell, Senior. The few of them bowed to Yu Qianshou together. They all knew that it was not good to stay here for long. Go ahead. Yu Qianshou raised his hand with an indifferent look. The few of them quickly left without saying anything. Yu Qianshou was still smiling. Guan Zhongkai couldn't help but ask with cupped hands. Senior, what you said just now is true. What's true can't be false, and what's false can't be true. We'll naturally know in the future. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. That kid will sooner or later. TSK. Let's not talk about it. Yu Qianshou suddenly frowned and said strangely, from the looks of these four experts at the end of the crossing calamity stage, it seems that Yan Zhuixing is very important to them. Their words and actions all revolve around him. Could it be that they already knew? Being reminded by him, the two of them were shocked. They suddenly remembered something that was known by all the forces. Everyone had been wondering why Bing Qingzi's side valued the Yan father and son so much, especially towards Yan Zhuixing. The few disciples of Bing Qingzi almost never left his side. Guan Zhongkai revealed an expression of sudden realization. He cupped his hands and said impatiently, Senior, I have something to do. I'll leave for a while. I'll be back soon. Yulan did the same. The two of them seemed to be afraid that Yu Qianshou wouldn't agree. Yu Qianshou smiled faintly and sighed. I know what you want to do. Is there a need to do this? Why worry about it? Even if the sky falls, there will be someone taller to hold it up. Don't blame me for not reminding you. I just exposed Yan Zhuixing's background. Although they can't do anything to me, they won't be afraid of you. If you're by my side, they definitely won't dare to touch you. But once you leave me, they might kill you to silence you. Of course, if you have to go back to report, I suggest that you two stay together. It's safer to stay together. Yu Qianshou was naturally afraid that something would happen to the two of them. If the two witnesses died and the words came out of Nyo Yud's mouth, even if it was true, no one would believe it. That was why he didn't forget to remind them so that their efforts wouldn't go to waste. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. The two of them bowed and thanked him. They looked at each other and nodded. Then, they rushed out of the back door of the restaurant. Yan Zhuixing, you haven't tasted the feeling of being hunted, right? I've already had my fill. You and I are enemies. How can we favor one and discriminate against the other? I'll let you have some fun too. Otherwise, I'll be sorry. I'll also watch the show. Yu Qianshou muttered and revealed a wretched smile. He slowly walked to the door and took out a large ingot of gold. He threw it to the smiling shopkeeper and waved his hand. Continue your business. I won't disturb you anymore. Chapter 578. But the shopkeeper was in a hurry to flatter Yu Qianshou and refused to take money. What a joke. He was flattering a person who was more important than the princess. How could he accept money? If he could form a relationship with such a person, it would be more valuable than this ingot of gold. Yu Qianqiu glared at him coldly. The shopkeeper suddenly felt a chill and shivered in fear. He didn't dare to pester him anymore and watched the distinguished guest disappear into the street. Walking to a secluded alley and seeing no one around, Yu Qianqiu flashed into the air. After identifying the direction, he flew to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce. The reason why he came to Lan City of Baiwan country was to find a chance to see Wen Lanfeng and see what this guy who supported him meant. He didn't want to be sold out without knowing. He didn't expect to meet Nongzhu in advance. He was relieved to know that Wen Lanfeng didn't have any bad intentions. The problem he had to solve now was Yan Zhuixing. Since he met him, he had to take the opportunity to eliminate this guy to avoid future trouble. If he was Yan Zhuixing, he would definitely kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to silence them. After all, the odds of winning against 2 with 4 in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage was very high. Plus, there was a strange guy like Yan Zhuixing, so the other party would definitely ambush on the way to the Lan City branch. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. If Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were in danger, he would definitely think of a way to save them and let them spread the news, just as he expected. In a wilderness on the outskirts of Lan City, Man Hu and the others were discussing how to split into 2 groups to intercept and kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. But what made them depressed was that everyone thought that Guan Zhongkai would go to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce to report. But what about Yulan? Where was the contact point of the Circe's kingdom? Where could they intercept and kill Yulan? There were only a few of them. They couldn't just scatter and search everywhere, right? As for Wenqing, who had the mind to care about her now, they had already dumped her. Damn it, why do we miss this? What's the point of just killing Guan Zhongkai? The rest of Yulan can still spread the news. The 7th brother stomped his feet in frustration. 5th brother looked at Man Hu and said, "Eldest brother, what do you think we should do?" Man Hu snorted coldly and said, "The Redbud Kingdom isn't far from the Snowy Mountains." Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to contact his master and ask him to personally take action. He asked the old man to immediately rush to the Purple Thistle Kingdom and kill Shangwan Taiping and the others before they spread the news. He believed that with his master's cultivation, killing Shangwan Taiping would not be a problem. In this way, even if they get the news, dead people won't reveal secrets. Lao Wu clapped his hands and agreed. That's right. Let's kill Shangwan Taiping and his men. I'm sure Yulan Du won't know about it for a while, so he won't spread the news. We'll definitely be able to find him easily. It's settled then. 5th brother, 6th brother, go find Yulan Du immediately. I'll send a message to Master first, and then I'll go to the Orchid City branch with 7th brother. The World Commerce doesn't have any experts here, and Guan Zhongkai isn't my match. The 2 of us are enough to wipe out the Orchid City branch. Man Hu waved his hand and said, "Let's split up." Just as Lao Wu and Lao Lu were about to leave, they heard Yan Zhuixing, who had been frowning and pondering, shout, "Wait!" The 4 martial brothers all paused, and Man Hu asked doubtfully, "Young palace master, this matter shouldn't be delayed. What else do you have to say?" Yan Zhuixing shook his head and sighed. "Do you really think that Niu Yu just casually mentioned it and will really stay out of it? That's impossible. If I'm not mistaken, he purposely said those words for Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to hear. If he really wants to stay out of it, it's fine as long as he knows it. Why must he say it out loud? Maybe he really spilled the beans? This kind of thing isn't impossible," Lao Qi casually said. Man Hu raised his hand to signal him to shut up, frowned, and said in a deep voice, "Young palace master is right. Niu Yud's last words are indeed fanning the flames." "Young palace master, what do you mean?" "I have a feeling that Niu Yud is purposely targeting me." Yan Zhuixing's eyes stared coldly in the direction of Lan City, gritted his teeth, and said, "Since he deliberately wants Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to spread the news, how can he let us kill the 2 of them so easily? If I'm not wrong, he will definitely obstruct us. With his cultivation, which one of us can stop him? Furthermore, if we make a move, it will make it even more obvious that we have ulterior motives, and it will prove that we want to silence them. At that time, we won't even have a chance to redeem ourselves. With all the countries fighting together, how can Senior Bing withstand the joint attack of a few experts? What a vicious plan. What is this Neo you trying to do? We have no enmity with him. Lao Wu let out a breath of cold air. Lao Chi weakly asked, do you guys think that Master has some enmity with him? What's the point of saying this now? Man Hu glared at him, then turned back and said, young Palace Master, do you have an idea? It can't be considered an idea. We can only try it as a last resort. At least there's a chance to recover our losses. Yin Juexing quickly analyzed to the others. The only thing we need to do now is to immediately send a message to Senior Bing so that he can be prepared. We have to return to Snowy Mountain as soon as possible before the news spreads. Otherwise, it won't be safe to stay anywhere. Once we have a foothold, we can accuse Neo Yud of spouting nonsense. After all, Neo Yud is a big liar, and everyone in the cultivation world knows that. In terms of credibility, we are better than him. In the end, it will depend on whose words are more trustworthy. This is our only chance. The others nodded slightly. Manu clapped his hands and said, all right, it's decided. You guys bring young Palace Master and hurry on with the journey. After I send the message to Master, I will immediately rush over. There's no time to lose. Let's go. In the blink of an eye, the four of them quickly flew into the sky. Man Hu was alone in the wilderness. He took out a handful of spirit stones, found the direction of Snowy Mountain, and used his unique voice transmission secret technique to send a message. Yu Qianqiu flew along the route from Lan City to the World Commerce Association's branch. Along the way, he didn't even see any signs of fighting, let alone hear any sounds of fighting. The Lan City branch was just ahead, so why wasn't there any reaction? Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, pinched his chin, and muttered to himself, strange, could it be that I made a mistake in my judgment? Or could Yin Juexing and the others bear the consequences of this news spreading? It can't be that awesome, right? Logically speaking, the World Commerce Association is the most powerful and has the widest channels to spread the news. The first person they would kill should be Guan Zhongkai. Just as he was about to go to the Lan City branch to see if Guan Zhongkai was there, he heard someone shouting, Senior Neo, why are you here? Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and saw Guan Zhongkai and Yulan coming together, followed by more than 10 people. The group of people gathered in the air and bowed to him. Senior Neo, no need to stand on ceremony. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, suppressing the doubts in his heart, and asked Guan Zhongkai, you've already sent the news back to the World Commerce Association's headquarters. Guan Zhongkai rubbed his palms excitedly and said, that's right, my master personally received the news. At the same time, my master also told this junior to thank Senior, saying that if it wasn't for Senior, we wouldn't have discovered such a major hidden danger. He was so excited because Sikong Ju praised him for doing well this time, saying that he would personally tell Grandmaster Imbaikong. As for his previous mistakes, he wouldn't pursue it anymore, and his authority in the World Commerce Association was restored. What a joke! This authority wasn't simple. In terms of seniority, he was the number 4 person in the World Commerce Association. He was second only to his martial uncle Jing Yuankong. How could he not be happy? As a matter of fact, as soon as he regained his authority to mobilize manpower, he immediately mobilized the 15 experts of the branch here. Half of it was for Yulan to see, to tell him that he hadn't lost power in the World Commerce Association. The other half was to ensure Yulan's safety when he went to deliver the news. After all, he was also worried that Man Hu and the others would silence them. If an accident happened, with these people blocking, it would be enough for the 2 of them to escape. Huh, don't thank me. This matter has nothing to do with me. You guys go do what you need to do. Yu Qianqiu politely and humbly brushed these people off. Watching the group of people disappear into the distance, he still had a stomach full of doubts and felt that something was wrong. After that, he arrived at the Lan City branch. The manager here also recognized him and immediately received him warmly. Yu Qianqiu let the manager do what he needed to and didn't need to care about him. Sitting in the inner hall and waiting for Guan Zhongkai to return, he frowned and thought about what went wrong. It shouldn't be like this. World Commerce Association headquarters, cornucopia god of Wealth Peak. After Sikong-ju received the news from his disciple, he immediately went to the Hall of Wealth at the top of the god of Wealth Peak and quickly informed the seated In Baikong of the news. What? There's such a thing? In Baikong opened his eyes and stood up. He stared at his eldest disciple and shouted, "Are you sure that this news is true? It shouldn't be false." Zhong Kai saw it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears. Sikong-ju explained, "According to Zhong Kai, Niu Yud seems to know Nongju. After sending Nongju out of the restaurant, he accidentally saw Yin Juexing and asked him a few questions on the spot. Although Niu Yud didn't take it seriously after asking, Zhong Kai saw that Yin Juexing and the others became nervous and quickly left. Zhong Kai felt that this was a serious matter and immediately returned to the Lon City branch to report this matter to me. In Baikong squinted his eyes and said, "You mean that Bing Chengzi's disciples know this secret? This is only Zhong Kai's judgment based on the situation on the spot. This is because he noticed that when Niu Yud mentioned this matter, the expressions of Bing Chengzi's 4 disciples were obviously not right. Furthermore, it was Man Hu, the eldest disciple of Bing Chengzi, who first found an excuse to bring Yin Juexing away. Sikong-ju was speaking the truth. However, he didn't know that Guan Zhongkai had exaggerated the matter a lot in order to atone for his crimes. He even showed off his wisdom and martial prowess. Bing Chengzi, what the hell are you trying to do?" In Baikong's expression turned sinister as he said in a deep voice, "When everyone decided to replace the Yin father and son, Bing Chengzi even came to persuade me and Hu Changsho to protect them. At that time, I felt that it was strange. They were just 2 insignificant people, and I couldn't figure it out. I almost forgot about it. Who would have thought that there was such a big secret? Bing Chengzi." Chapter 579. Sikong-ju sighed, "Speaking of which, we really have to thank that Niu Yud this time. If it wasn't for him seeing through us, we would still be in the dark. However, that Niu Yud is really powerful. I wonder how high his cultivation is. Let's put Niu Yud's matter aside. Who else knows about Yin Juexing?" In Baikong asked. Shangguan Taiping's disciple. Yulandu he was also at the scene and saw some clues. Right now, Zhong Kai is escorting him to deliver the news. Sikong-ju replied. "Fool!" In Baikong scolded and immediately made arrangements. "Before the news spreads, immediately send an order to all the branches to search for Yin Juexing's whereabouts. We must find him before anyone else. You will personally oversee this matter. Once you find Yin Juexing, you must capture him alive. I want to see what kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique he's hiding." Sikong-ju was slightly startled. He immediately understood his master's meaning. He shouldn't have left Yulandu alive and let him deliver the news to Shangguan Taiping. How could such a heaven-defying cultivation technique fall into the hands of others? However, it was too late to regret now. A trace of regret flashed across Sikong-ju's face. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "I'll go arrange it now." Just as he turned around, he heard his master say with a gratified tone, "Your muddle-headed disciple, Guan Zhongkai, has done a good job. When he returns, I'll personally see him." Sikong-ju turned around and declined. "Master is overpraising me. He made 2 mistakes previously, and this disciple has already thickened his face to protect him. This time, he's only atoning for his mistakes. How would I dare to let Master see him personally?" Sikong-ju didn't report Guan Zhongkai's 2 mistakes to his master. Although it was within his authority, he didn't think that he could hide it from his master. Since it was already mentioned, he naturally had to make it clear. He was very clear about his master In Baikong's character. These words of praise were actually a test. If he didn't know about Guan Zhongkai's mistakes, then he would be an idiot. In Baikong gave a non-committal. Sikong-ju sneaked a glance and saw that his master's expression had eased up quite a bit. He was even more certain that his master was just testing him. His back was already drenched in cold sweat. In Baikong waved his hand at him. and Ju quickly descended the mountain. The origin of the Redbud Kingdom's name was because there was a sea of redbud flowers that covered an area of several hundred miles in the kingdom. The people in the country liked to climb high mountains to see the endless sea of Chinese redbud flowers. The red and green colors were pleasing to the eye. However, they could only watch from afar and were not allowed to enter. Even the nobles were the same. This forbidden area had existed for many years. Although the imperial court had given strict orders, it was still too vast. It was impossible to send people to guard it. Thus, there were often people who wanted to sneak in to see what was going on, but those who entered usually never returned. Gradually, although this gorgeous sea of redbud flowers was pleasing to the eye, it also seemed somewhat strange, and no one dared to trespass. In the depths of the sea of redbud flowers, in a place that was difficult for outsiders to see, there was actually a stretch of magnificent buildings. Inside the main building, the Grand Redbud Flower Palace, the Mid-Soul Formation cultivator Shangwan Taiping had just received a message from his disciple, Yulan Du. After recovering from his shock, he was now pacing back and forth alone in the hall, constantly muttering the three words Baikong. Of course, he wanted to obtain the peerless magic art that could dominate the world. However, this news had already fallen into Baikong's hands. Although he was the second to know, he knew that with the World Commerce Association interfering, this piece of meat would not belong to him. Presumably, the World Commerce Association had already taken action. What worried him the most was that the Great Snow Mountain, where Bing Chengzi, who was currently ranked third in the cultivation world, lived, was not far from here. It was a neighboring country. If he interfered in this matter, Bing Chengzi might be the first to deal with him. This would not be fun. Although Bai Changchun has the ability to dominate the cultivation world, he has never had such great ambitions. Now that everyone is living in peace, this is good. If the likes of Baikong were to have such strength, I'm afraid there would be no place for me to stand. I didn't expect Bing Chengzi to be such an ambitious person. Shangwan Taiping folded his arms and laughed to himself, muttering, "This matter must be known to the people of the world. Whoever wants to dominate the cultivation world has to ask the consent of the cultivators of the world." Finished speaking, he turned around and strode towards the rear hall. He had already made his decision. No matter how tempting this fruit was, he had to endure it. With his cultivation, there was no chance of him taking advantage of this opportunity. He had to spread this news as soon as possible, otherwise he might lose his life because of this news. Baikong was not a good person. Manhu and the others finally experienced the power of the World Commerce Association. Originally, with their cultivation, they would have reached the Great Snow Mountain in less than 3 days. However, after 3 days, they had only covered half of the distance. There was really no other way. Wherever there was a possibility of leading to the Great Snow Mountain, there were people from the World Commerce Association hiding everywhere. Along the way, they had already tried to be as low-key as possible. However, there were constantly people who disregarded their lives and forcefully obstructed them, as if they had received a death order. The 5 of them had already fought dozens of battles, killing at least 200 to 300, if not 400 to 500 enemies. Fortunately, with the cultivation of the 5 of them, they were able to grit their teeth and endure it, and nothing happened to them. Now that things had come to this, it was clear that the entire World Commerce Association had been mobilized. Once their whereabouts were exposed, there were more and more people intercepting them. The opponent's cultivation was also getting higher and higher. Among the people they encountered, the number of experts at the late tribulation passing stage was gradually increasing. This was not a good sign. In a dense forest, the 5 people were hiding. From their appearance, they seemed to be in a somewhat sorry state. Number 5, number 6, and number 7 stood in a triangle, vigilantly watching their surroundings. Yan Zhuixing, who was surrounded by the 3 of them, was sitting cross-legged. If one looked closely, they would discover that he was not actually sitting on the ground. He was still a few inches off the ground, floating up and down slightly with his eyes closed. 7 poisonous, snake-like black fiendish auras were swimming around his body. Within each black fiendish aura, there was a faintly discernible blood light flashing, appearing exceptionally strange. At the side, man whose expression was solemn as he carefully guarded Yin Juexing, like a personal bodyguard. In the past few days of battle, they had continuously killed several late tribulation passing stage experts. To others, it was not a big deal if they could kill him. But to Yin Juexing, who cultivated demonic arts, a late tribulation passing stage nascent soul was an excellent tonic. None of the nascent souls he had devoured before had such a high cultivation, including the 6 late tribulation passing stage experts. Yin Juexing had already devoured the nascent souls of more than 10 tribulation passing stage experts in 2 days. Man Hu and the others were the first to see this bloody scene of devouring. They were somewhat shocked, but they were already numb to it and did not find it strange. But what was worse was that eating too much tonic was not a good thing. If it was any other time, they would naturally be eager. But at this critical moment when they were escaping, Yin Juexing suddenly discovered that it was time for his demonic eyes to make a breakthrough. The opening chapter of the demonic book said, "Follow one's nature and become a demon. Once the opportunity arrives, one will immediately become a demon." The general meaning was that cultivating the demonic book was about following one's nature. If there was an opportunity to make a breakthrough, one must seize it and not miss it. Once the opportunity was missed, it would be wasted. Yin Juexing naturally could not miss such a good opportunity. It should be known that every inch of progress in the demonic book would bring him unimaginable benefits. So at this critical moment, he still decided to make a breakthrough. And Man Hu and the others had nothing to say. They could only do their best to help. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of high-speed flying sounds swept past the top. The few of them immediately held their breaths. After the sounds faded, they saw Old 7, who was staring at the gaps between the leaves above, angrily say, "It's Ouyang Da's people from the great Liao nation. They also interfered. This is expected. I have already contacted Master again and informed him of the situation. Master has already set off from the Great Snow Mountain to pick us up. Don't say too much and be careful," Manu said calmly. The other three's faces were filled with joy. Master had personally made a move. They suddenly felt a lot more confident. With Master's cultivation, it would take at most half a day to get here. On the first day, everyone only met people from the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. They did not see any other forces interfering. The few of them thought that Ian Baikong wanted to monopolize the demonic book and purposely controlled the spread of the news. This was a good thing for them, who were escaping. After all, no matter how big the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce was, it was still limited. However, before the second day arrived, they discovered that outstanding heroes were everywhere. There were people flying everywhere to search for them, forcing them to hide in all directions. If Yu Chincho knew about this, he would definitely laugh very happily. Back then, he was forced into the misty forest by people like this. Now that he could let Yin Juexing have a taste of this, how could he not be happy? The 7 black fiends that were circling around, Yin Juexing suddenly moved faster. The 4 of them looked over and saw Yin Juexing's chest suddenly expand. He took a deep breath, and the 7 black fiends entered his nostrils in a blink of an eye. Then his eyes moved slightly. Just as he opened his eyes, they saw a red glow that seemed to be overflowing. When he opened his eyes, the red glow overflowed and completely covered his eyes. Man Hu and the other 3 stared at his eyes and felt like their souls were captivated. They felt like they couldn't control themselves. Just as the 4 of them were shocked, the red glow quickly disappeared. Yin Juexing's eyes had already returned to normal. They were still pitch black. The 4 of them also calmed their minds in an instant. However, they still looked at each other with lingering fear. Man Hu asked softly, "Young Palace Master, have you already broken through?" "I have already cultivated to the realm of demon ecstasy," Yin Juexing said with a cold expression. The few of them revealed expressions of joy. They did not find his cold reaction strange at all. This was because every time he cultivated, he would have this reaction. Everyone was already used to it. Unbeknownst to them, when Yin Juexing's demon eye was shining with red light, there was an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator hovering in the sky. As he scanned the dense forest, he suddenly discovered a red light flashing through the gaps in the forest. It immediately aroused his vigilance, and he stealthily came over here. Chapter 580. At this time, Yu Qianqiu had already left Lan City with Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had both made great contributions and received praise from their master. They were naturally in a good mood and were even more respectful towards Niu Yud. But what made the two more depressed was that this Niu Yud was still half dead on the road. He clearly had such a high level of cultivation, but he refused to speed up. Instead, he continued to fly on a broken flying sword. What was worse was that he kept stopping along the way. It was no different from a sightseeing tour. So Guan Zhongkai said weakly, "Senior Niu, if we keep going like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the World Chamber of Commerce by the time the cornucopia gathering starts." Unexpectedly, Niu Yud raised his eyebrows and said, "What? You think I'm flying too slow? If I fly too fast, and you lose me, and I can't find the way to the World Chamber of Commerce, don't blame me for not keeping my word after taking the money." Yulan secretly smiled. He didn't care. He actually wanted Niu Yud to slow down. It was best if he didn't go to the World Chamber of Commerce. No, I was wrong. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly blocked in front of him and smiled apologetically. Walk slowly, no rush, no rush. If he really lost Niu Yud, the consequences were not something he could bear. If he was slow, then so be it. At least he could push the blame onto Niu Yud when it was late. It had nothing to do with him. Niu Yud gave him an unhappy look. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to fly fast, but his cultivation was only so high. No matter how fast he went, he couldn't go very fast. In the end, because of these few words, fine, this Niu Yud simply had Yulan by 3 horses and rode them slowly on the ground. He could walk dozens of li in a day. Yulan was naturally happy to cooperate. Guan Zhongkai was about to cry. He was just short of calling him ancestor. I told you to slow down, but not this slow method. How long would it take to reach the World Chamber of Commerce? If he was this slow, it would be strange if he was fine. He would definitely be taught a lesson when he returned. So Guan Zhongkai tried to persuade him with kind words, but Niu Yud only said that he was tired of flying and didn't want to fly anymore. In the end, the former begged for a long time before agreeing to his method of using a flying artifact. Sitting on the flying Dharma artifact, Yu Qianqiu was carefree, but he did not stop. Every once in a while, he would force the two of them to inquire about Yin Juexing to see if he had been captured. Fortunately, this was not a difficult matter for Guan Zhongkai. With the World Chamber of Commerce's information network in various countries, it was very easy for him to obtain the latest news. In this large area of space, there was a person observing every 1 kilometer because Yin Juexing and the other 4 had disappeared within this area. He was just one of them. However, coincidentally, Yin Juexing and the others who were being apprehended were right below him. He did not know if this was his opportunity to render meritorious service or his misfortune. A sky-shaking sound arrow was quietly held in his hand. If there really was a target down there, he wouldn't need to risk his life. As long as he sent a signal, he would have made a great contribution. After that, a large number of experts would gather here. If he captured Yin Juexing, his contribution would be even greater. Silently and gently, he approached the dense forest below. However, the vegetation in this forest was really dense. He had already reached the treetops, but he couldn't see the scene below clearly. He stretched his head left and right, trying to see what was happening below through the gaps between the branches and leaves without alerting his target. However, he was in the light, and the area covered by the towering trees was very dark. This was how people's visual reaction was. It was difficult to see anything in the dark from the light, but it was very clear from the light from the dark. He had clearly seen a red light flash before, and he was definitely not seeing things. However, there was no movement at all now. Without a choice, he tightened his grip on the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, ready to send a signal at any time. His body tried to avoid rubbing against the branches and leaves as he slowly descended. Although the movement from touching the branches and leaves was very small, what were the cultivations of man, who, and the others? They were much taller than him, and in addition, they were constantly on guard, so they immediately sensed the faint movement. The four of them looked up at the top of Yan Juexing's head at the same time. Yan Juexing's cultivation was not as good as the four of them, so he did not notice anything at first. However, the four of them's actions undoubtedly indicated something. He slowly raised his head and looked up. The light from the branches and leaves was flickering, and he could vaguely see a person diving down. The seventh brother had a fierce expression as he prepared to kill him. Man who quickly signaled his three juniors to not act blindly without thinking, and transmitted his voice. Everyone hide well. He has a whistling arrow in his hand. Wait for him to come down before making a move. Don't give him a chance to send a signal. The four of them quietly hid behind a big tree, ready to launch a sneak attack. However, they discovered that Yan Juexing slowly stood up in the air and did not have the slightest intention of hiding. Man who anxiously transmitted his voice. Young Palace Master, don't beat the grass and alert the snake. Don't worry, I just wanted to test the power of the demon ecstasy. Yan Juexing raised his head and looked up, just in time. Just as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly blossomed with a demonic red light. The cultivator who had dived down had mixed into the shade of the trees and had gradually adapted to the darkness below. Stealthily pushing aside the last eyesore in front of him, he focused his gaze and looked down. What surprised him was that there seemed to be someone looking at him from below. From the light that leaked out, he could see the glimmer in the other party's eyes. In that instant, the pair of ice-cold eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic and breathtaking red light. It reflected directly into his eyes, and then he couldn't see anything. Only his eyes were filled with red. His consciousness instantly fell into a coma, and when he suddenly woke up, he discovered that he was in a boundless sea of blood. Panic, fear, and he wanted to shout loudly, and he wanted to struggle with all his might. However, he discovered that he could not shout, and his limbs were so heavy that he could not even move a finger. At this moment, a light suddenly appeared in the distant sea of blood, and it seemed to be an escape route. Come over, come over, come over. In the direction of the exit, there were people constantly calling out to him, and then he involuntarily floated over. Man who and the other three stared nervously in this direction. Once the other party sent out a signal, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was not like before. At that time, it was only the World Commerce Association that was chasing, but now, all the powers had come to join in the fun. Yan Juexing's demonic eye activated, and when the red light lit up, the four of them felt their minds ripple. Fortunately, it was not targeted at the four of them, so it did not affect them much. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand towards the person hiding behind the tree and softly called out, "Come over." The voice was like a sleep-talking murmur, like a mother calling her naughty son home for dinner, harmless and warm. As for the person behind the tree, he pushed aside the tree branches and slowly floated towards Yan Juexing with a dazed look in his eyes. He was still holding the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, but did not have any effect. Instead, he stiffly loosened his fingers, and the arrow fell onto the thick layer of leaves. The red light in Yan Juexing's eyes had already disappeared, and his eyes had turned into an abnormally terrifying blood-red color. It made one's scalp tingle, and it did not look like a human's eyes. That cultivator quietly floated in front of Yan Juexing, and with a silly smile, he stared at that pair of blood-red eyes. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand and gently stroked his face. His movements were very gentle. Just as the smile on that cultivator's face grew wider, the blood red in Yan Juexing's eyes faded, and he regained his cold and emotionless look. That cultivator immediately became confused, as if he could not find his way. Man Hu and the other three were no longer affected when Yin Juexing withdrew the red light in his eyes. But they still stared dumbfoundedly at this abnormally strange scene. Suddenly, Yin Juexing's hand that was caressing the other party changed from gentle to sinister 5 claws. With a lingering, killing intent, it pierced into the lower half of the other party's face with a crack. From the nose to the entire chin, it was completely wrapped in this claw. Fresh blood flowed out uncontrollably. That cultivator felt the pain, and his eyes instantly regained clarity. Then they bulged out, filled with disbelief. Struggle. But with half of his face being grabbed, how could he struggle free? The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He could not even make a sound of pain or cry for help. His nose and mouth were grabbed by the other party. So how could he make a sound? Kacha! Half of his face was crushed together, and a bloody hole appeared on the lower half of his face. The breath exhaled from the bloody hole blew out a blood bubble, and with a pew it burst. That person almost fainted from the pain and lost control of his body. Just as he was about to fall, Yin Juexing expressionlessly clenched his 5 claws into a fist and lightly shouted, "Little devil fist." A fist imprinted on the other party's chest. Bang! The sound was not too loud, and it was only a muffled sound. Obviously, the strength was controlled perfectly. However, that cultivator exploded into pieces in an instant, and blood rained down on the ground. Yin Juexing, who was floating in the forest, expressionlessly shook off the blood on his hand. The strange thing was that his hand did not seem to be stained with blood. He just shook it, and there was not even a trace of blood on his hand. He glanced at the direction where the 4 of them were hiding, and, as if nothing had happened, he said, "Stay Preceptor, let us continue on our way." The 4 of them walked out silently and looked at the scattered red on the ground. They were still in a daze. They did not expect the devil eye to be so powerful to be able to directly control people. It was a little too scary. First it was the devil eye, then the devil claw, and finally the little devil fist, which easily solved the problem. The 4 of them thought back to that scene. If it was used on them, they did not know if they could block it. Just thinking about it made them feel a chill down their spines. Oh well, Six picked up the sky-shaking arrow and put it in his storage bag. Man Hu laughed bitterly and waved his hand. "Let's go." Fly close to the ground in the forest. Although the speed is much slower, at least it is safer. I hope I can meet Master soon. After saying that, he identified the direction and flew away. The 4 of them followed closely behind him. The 5 of them fluttered in the forest, avoiding the trees in front of them. Looking at Yin Juexing's flying speed, he was actually not any slower than them, but there was a layer of black light wrapped around his body. This was the flying movement technique from the demonic book, Devil Light Glimpse. Otherwise, with his cultivation, there would be a big gap if he wanted to keep up with the speed of the 4 of them. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.